Untamed is going to be untamed. It's going to be a little crazy. I want to talk to my people. I want to talk to my brothers and sisters. We can have grace and humility in how we interact with other people.
Oh, hot dog, look at you.
And nobody talked about what's really happening.
And let's have conversations about what truth is.
So let's talk about it. I know we're going to put this up, so put me on the side, make sure that people know when they get here that we'll be transitioning into Tina Peters' appeals court case. There were three. Can we take the music off? There we go. You put we'll fix it. We'll fix it. We'll bring it in here, but let's put it on the screen. That was perfect the way you put it. And then make sure that actually, maybe we have it in the courtroom where you're watching. We need to make sure we keep a really close eye on it. There was three people that were granted privileges to broadcast the Tina Peters appeals case hearing, and we were one of three. I believe CNN was the other one. So if you really feel froggy and you want to go over and hang out at CNN, you have the ability to do that as well. We're going to talk about a lot today, and while we wait, let's go ahead and put that up. Again, I want to make sure that people understand that we'll be covering Tina Peters' trial today. All right, there we go. Hopefully it didn't turn me off on the screen. It just took care of the music on that one specifically. Go ahead and share it. Make sure everybody knows whatever platform you're on. If you're having any trouble, make sure you report it back to us. We'll be broadcasting on the pilled.net. We'll be on Rumble. We'll be on Facebook. We'll be on X. We'll be on Roku. We'll be on all the normal places. And starting next week, we will be on Spotify Live. So that'll be one of the new channels that we actually are able to broadcast live on. So it should be really good for us. Before we get into anything else, as we wait for and go through and listen to the oral arguments for Tina Peters, whether or not they accept the fact that President Trump issued a pardon and using the supremacy clause and a couple other case arguments, it could result in Tina Peters being released from jail. Now, do I think that's going to happen in the state of Colorado? No, I think that the judiciary is so rotted in Colorado. It is so bad, and the judges are so bad in Colorado that I don't think that you're going to find a whole lot of judges that are willing to do the right thing, that are willing to look at what we're dealing with in Colorado, and they'll have the courage to stand up and do the right thing. Now, with that said, I sent a couple of stuff over into the chat. If you could grab this for me really quick. I have said over and over again, and we're going to talk about the Somalis. We're going to talk about some of the other things, but I want to start this way. There's a real push on the left to eliminate ICE and to demonize good people. And they did the same thing in 2020. They've used the same playbook. The CIA, how you know it's the CIA and how you know it is people that are really just evil, evil people, is that they've never changed the playbook. The playbook has always stayed the same. Always. There's been no difference. They have never changed it. They've used the same tactics. And we're like cattle. The same people that reacted to COVID and said, shut it down, and walked into different restaurants and stores and ridiculed and went after people that wouldn't wear a mask, they're the same people that are acting like fools right now. They did not change. They're the same ones that are standing on this high horse and acting like they are the moral authority. They're not. They're demonic. But I want to ask you guys a question. If we haven't been infiltrated, if our elections are free and fair, and we're a country of 320 million Americans, right? We have lots of Americans here, lots of people here. If we are not infiltrated and they haven't taken us over, then please tell me. I'm going to play 2 clips about getting rid of ICE. I want to play it. You tell me how these people became the representatives of the people in this country that have been here for generations. Play the first one.
And we must, finally, we must reform ICE. But it looks at this stage, folks, ICE is beyond reform. ICE is totally out of control. And this week, I intend to introduce a bill to abolish ICE. We need to make ICE go away. 2003, before 2003, without ICE, various federal agencies were able to take care of business, and we can do this without ICE. But we do not need the murderers. We do not need these paramilitary organizations, members on our street terrorizing.
All right, there's the first one. Now let's play. Oh, you're playing? Okay. So that guy ran for Congress and was elected. Ilhan Omar ran for Congress and was elected. And I want to start by going through this. This is a clip from President Trump on no voter ID. Let's go ahead and play this first one.
We made the last one, Matt, too big to rig, right? That's what you got. That's the only way you win races in many cases. I got to tell you, it's too bad. I think they should get voter ID. Wouldn't it be nice? The Democrats are totally against voter ID. Who's against voter ID? How can you even campaign? We are against voter ID. How do you not get voter ID? You know what it means, Matt, right? When you're against voter ID, you want to cheat. That's all. There's only one reason you want to cheat, and they do cheat. It's terrible. Michigan Senator.
And here's something else you should know. As we start talking about this massive amounts of fraud that occurs across all of the country, and we can't get to the bottom of it. We can't get to the bottom of the Somalis. We can't get to the bottom of the voter fraud. And all they keep saying is over and over again is it's misinformation, disinformation, misinformation, disinformation, misinformation, disinformation. And we're stuck having to have the same argument, and we bring up evidence, massive amounts of evidence. And obviously I have a vested interest in this. I have paid for Tina Peters to make sure that she doesn't lose everything she has while she's in prison. I've done that for the last 4 years. And I personally am being sued by this guy, Eric Coomer, who's the head of strategy and security for Dominion Voting Systems. We have provided so much information and so much proof and of the fraud and the fact that he's involved in it and the fact that we've been able to tie it back mathematically to all the other stuff that he did, right? That he was responsible for, and the things that he lied about. Anyway, we've done all of it. We've basically gift wrapped it. But the left comes up with the same thing. They say the same thing. And the people are like, well, they say that there's no fraud. They say there's no fraud. Well, here's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirming there are tapes of Minnesota AG Ellison taking money to stop the investigations into Somalis. Tapes. Our country is irrevocably broken. No machines and no mail-in ballots. We get an ID in person one day, and for you that say that, oh, I like the convenience, let me explain something to you. We are headed off a cliff. Your family members will be dead. That is the whole haves versus have-nots. The have-nots will be dead. And then the haves will try and have the haves and get rid of half of them as well. No machines, no mail-in ballots. We get to a place where the people in each community can count the ballots. And the only argument I ever hear is, oh, they'll get the count wrong. Any more wrong than the machines? Please tell me. Please tell me. But here, we got it. I mean, they have tapes. But the AG, not arrested yet. Play it.
Part of following the money, there are evidently some disturbing tapes of AG Ellison in meetings with people who donated to him, them calling for political favors to stop the investigations. So we'll see. But again, I don't want to get out ahead of the investigations. It's going to be very methodical. And Chris, I can guarantee you, when the bear trap snaps, we're going to get these folks. And again, we're going to follow the money, whether it's over the two counties here, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or whether it's to East Africa. And there's tons of luxury properties, cars that have been bought over there. And
you have the Treasury Secretary talking about things that are absolutely happening in our country, and yet no one's been arrested. Let me ask you a question. If you committed a crime and the police showed up and you committed a crime, would they arrest you? Did they waste any time on J6? They waste any time on J6? Any? Any at all? Any? They waste any time at all arresting the American citizens on J6 on trumped up charges that the Supreme Court had to come down and say, no, you can't use a 1512 to hold people. You can't give them 4 or 5 years for that. What are you doing? But these judges, I walked through it. There's no consequences for judges. You have to go through an entire impeachment process. So if you have an entire group of judges, they can do the damage that they're doing to our country. They can stand in the way and stop progress from happening until they can steal another election. If we don't get free and fair elections, if we don't get to where there's no machines and no mail-in ballots, and I'm going to say it every day because I personally think that if we're going to do it, let's do it now. But if you're going to wait too much longer, it's already done. The fix is in, and let me tell you something. History is written by the victors. It's not written by people that cleaned things up for 8 years and gave us a reprieve of all of the tyranny that we faced during the Biden administration or even before. Here's Tom Homan that wants to talk about why in Minnesota, why is it that we can't get to the bottom of all this fraud, that we can't get all the people out in these areas that are criminals that are in our country illegally. Go ahead and play it.
President Trump made his promise to American people, we're going to find these criminals and make America safe again. So if they don't let us in a jail, we're going to go in the community. And the difference is, in places that's not a sanctuary, one agent can walk into a jail and arrest one criminal illegal alien. But when you release them in the community, now we got to send the whole team because we got to arrest somebody on their turf. They have access, who knows what weapons. It makes it dangerous for the officer, makes it dangerous for the alien, certainly makes it dangerous for the community. So if Minneapolis wants to help, like I saw Mayor Fry doing an interview this morning, let us in your damn jail. What's the downside of letting a federal law enforcement officer with the immigration authority talk to an illegal alien that you already locked up and put in a jail cell? It's ridiculous that they're pushing back on that.
So why? Why push back? Now, I'm going to go back to the first video that we played, that I asked to be played, of this Deep Deep, who supposedly represents the people of Minnesota. Go ahead and play it.
And we must, finally, we must reform ICE. But it looks at this stage, folks, ICE is beyond reform. ICE is totally out of control. And this week, I intend to introduce a bill to abolish ICE. We need to make ICE go away. 2003, before 2003, without ICE, various federal agencies were able to take care of business, and we can do this without ICE. But we do not need the murderers. We do not need this paramilitary organizations, members on our street terrorizing.
All right, let's play the next one.
To all ICE officers,
No,
you have
not that
federal
one. Not that one.
immunity.
The one that I put in the one that I put in the comments. The woman representative, Ramirez. No. You do. Oh, no, you don't. Well, geez. Well, that's why. Okay. Let me just spell it out for you. There's two reps that got up and talked. Both of them are people that came to this country, have been in the country less than 10 years. Both don't speak English. at least not very well. I mean, this guy can't articulate his position other than we need to get rid of ICE. These are people from foreign countries that come here, run for office, are injected into the system, and make and create environments where your tax dollars get funneled to other people. Your money goes to them. You get to go to work. You get to pay $2,000 if you're a mother for childcare to have your child go in for childcare. They get free childcare. They get free health care. They get free entitlements. They get free food. If they're from a Muslim nation, you'll have one man that marries one woman, but he has 4 different wives, 4 different houses. You pay for every one of those houses. Those mothers actually show up as single moms, and they'll have 6, 7, 8 kids. They don't pay taxes. They run organizations like you saw in the Somalis. This is not just a Somali problem. This happens in the United States in every single state, including Florida, which we're digging into right now. Every single state has a system that gives non-Americans preferential treatment over Americans, and you get to pay for it. And then we have a system that elects people that aren't American to bring their un-American trash into our environment. I don't care if you come to this country because you want a better life, but you bring your garbage here and you destroy the foundation, the ethos of our country. That I have a problem with. And I don't think that the people in this country would vote for any of it. Matter of fact, if you took out the fraudulent and the fake ballots and you took out all the grift that happened around the country, the Democrats wouldn't hold water anywhere. Here's what they wouldn't have. They wouldn't be able to take the positions that they have, that cut off penises and that put boys in girls sports, and were able to do all these things and Satan clubs and everything else. None of that would be a position they would take because even Democrats wouldn't vote for them. But they're allowed to take that. And Democrats get bullied into saying you have to support these people because you can't support the Republicans. How dare you support the Republicans? You can't support the Republicans. Because by supporting the Republicans, you're actually supporting racists. We're not racists. We're Americans. I haven't been able to have a conversation with one person. I went to go get my haircut today. I got it all cut off. I went to go get my haircut today. I'm talking to the hairdresser. She is a Democrat. She's been my hairdresser she's cut my hair for, I don't know, 7 years. And she goes, Joe, why in the world would you run for governor? And I was like, because I need to clean things up. And I walked through what I thought needed to happen. And she goes, I would vote for that. And I was like, okay, well, that's what I want to do. And then I asked her, I said, hey, let me ask you a question. I was going to say her name, but I didn't get permission to say her name, so I'm not going to. Do you trust judges? She said, no. I was like, see, we agree. The judges in this country are rotted to the core. If you want to know where all the racist, homophobic, evil resides, it's in our judiciary. It's in our judiciary. It's rotted to the core. And they don't follow any rules. They don't do anything that abides. They are supposed to not be the arbiter of it. They're supposed to get it through procedurally and be the referee while a jury comes to some conclusions. But that's not what they're doing. See, what these judges are doing is they're actually just getting in the middle of it and saying, we're going to disrupt everything that President Trump is doing. We're going to side on and do a default judgment against Giuliani. We're going to do a default judgment against this person. We're going to fire the attorneys for Patrick Byrne and say that they can't represent you. Anytime you get a good, competent set of attorneys, you just fire them or you deny every motion like they did in the Tina Peters case. These judges are rotted to the core. And if you want to know if you actually have the ability to overrule that, you don't. You don't have any way to overrule it. And you're like, well, Joe, there's got to be some good judges. Yeah, there probably is. There probably is. But I want to remind you that President Trump was kicked off the ballot in Colorado. I want to also remind you that there's a Christopher Gregory case out there right now with tens of millions of dollars in bribes that went through by a guy that was on the inside. That it took almost 5 years to get to a place where the U.S. government would accept the case. It was under a QTAM before that, meaning that nobody was allowed to talk about it. It was sealed v. sealed. That's what the judiciary does. It slows things down to try and wear down the side so you just walk away and do something different. That is actually happening in our country right now. We had a guy on here yesterday that the Colorado Supreme Court said, yeah, we're denying that you actually have a right to protect your son. And the only thing that he can do is go to the U.S. Supreme Court, which picks up 0.1% of the cases that are before him. So what kind of country do we live in? And by the way, this is bipartisan. Nobody trusts the judiciary. It's rotted out to the core. The most evil people you will find are inside of the judiciary, doing some real damage to the people of not only Colorado, but around the country. And I asked someone that is not in the judiciary, I go, why don't you trust them? She goes, you can't trust them. They've become political hacks. She can see it. She's not a part of it. She's been just cutting hair. And she's on the left. And she goes, look, I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it affect family members. I've seen it, what it's done to parents when they get divorced. She goes, I've seen all of it. I've seen all, and not one of it is fair. None of it is fair. It's designed to hurt people. And you can't get rid of these judges. Because then you just have posts electing a more radical person, putting a radical person in that position. But you got to wait 2, 3, 4 years, hundreds, if not thousands of lives being ruined. All because they get to basically pick and choose and sit behind there like a wizard behind the curtain and do real harm to destroy American principles. That's your judiciary. I want to play this. This is Stephen Miller talking about what's going on with the attacks on ICE. But the people that are being elected or not elected on either side, Republican or Democrat, President Trump said something very true, and that is they out-rigged, it was too big to rig. But he's saying it out loud, that the elections are rigged. They're all rigged. There's no free and fair elections. There's no free elections at the local level, at the state level, or at the federal level. The entire system is designed to steal your voice. You are, in fact, a slave. And I'm not fighting for Republicans. I'm fighting for people. People. Play this. This is Steve Miller talking.
To all ICE officers, you have federal immunity in the conduct of your duties. And anybody who lays a hand on you or tries to stop you or tries to obstruct you is committing a felony.
What?
You have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties. And the Department of Justice has made clear that if officials cross that line into obstruction, into criminal conspiracy against the United States or against ICE officers, then they will face justice.
Okay, what does justice look like? Here's Ilhan Omar announcing that Democrats will oppose all funding on ICE. Another un-American, non-American who said that she works for the Somali people over in Somalia, not for Americans. We've been infiltrated. Let's go ahead and play it.
And so today, I am glad to announce that the Congressional Progressive Caucus has adopted an official position to hold ICE accountable. Our caucus members will oppose all funding for immigration enforcement in any appropriation bills until meaningful reforms are enacted to end militarized policing practices.
So during the Biden administration, I just want to put a bow on this for you. For anyone that's listening to this that would be, connected to what's happening in the Trump campaign, and this is why I vehemently oppose Bondi and Todd Blanche, is because they're not doing anything. They're doing nothing. The NSA has information on everyone and everything. If you think that things are secure and that you can't be tracked, you can. And we've arrested no one. And on one side, they terrorize people by throwing people in jail, bullying them, using the media as a beat stick, ruining people's reputations, defaming them, slandering them with impunity, attacking their businesses. Technocracies and bigger companies, what we call walled gardens, allow it to happen. Allow people to put up negative reviews and do things with whatever they want. And what do? You're gonna go to the court system? Well, what happened with them? The judges just let that go. Oh, no. They're allowed to have an opinion on a business. They're allowed to leave a review. They're allowed to do these things. And I just talked about one small piece. So during the 4 years that President Trump was not in office, they ruined lives. People committed suicide. They raped people in jail. They did whatever they want. Tina Peters has uncovered some of the most inhumane treatment of young women that have been raped in transport vans. That actually happened. But have you ever heard about it? No. Because they're in jail, they can do whatever they want to them. And while they let criminals out on the street, what these judges let criminals out on the street, there's people that have been locked up for 15, 20 years for 2 ounces of marijuana that have been in there 12, 15 years of a 20, 25-year sentence, can't get out. Like, our system is 1,000% completely broken. And we have people that are not Americans that are telling us we're going to get rid of ICE so that these criminals can operate, these cartels can operate on our streets. And nobody wants to talk about that. They will walk over. In Minnesota, there's 2 Minnesotans that were killed by an illegal, and nobody has said a word about it. Here you go. Here's something else that you should probably see. Play the next one.
Do you have a job? Do you have a job?
Shame! I'm getting paid right now! Shame! Shame! I'm getting paid right now! Shame! Shame! Shame!
Do you have a job? Do you have a job?
Shame!
What are we doing? You know, I get on Facebook, or I get on some of these places, these social accounts, and I see the seething that happens. And it's not just ICE. It's like it's utter chaos. Look, I have had the ability to see inside and be in countries where I've watched protests happen. Going back to 2008, 2009, 2010, Antifa protests in Europe, in the Balkans, in areas where they were basically creating mass chaos, tear gas, everything that you've seen here, it happened there first. They tested it there first, then brought it here. I've seen it. Now let's talk about the Maduro protests, and on top of the ICE protests, and people, you cannot even reconcile the fact that these people will literally stand up and oppose anything. Play it.
Right now, I'm following the money. Let's see where they go. We're following these paid protesters and seeing where they're bringing all these signs to. Obviously, these signs are going somewhere, and we're here to figure out where they're going, because this is kind of odd. Look at all these signs that we have over here. Where are they going with this? Watch them all just hop in a van and be on their way. Hey, excuse me, sir, can I ask you a question about why you guys are carrying all these signs? Sir, would you be able to answer a question? I'm just curious to know where you guys are bringing all these signs, and where do they come from? They look very nice. How much did you guys pay for these signs? Yeah, what about the CCP funding allegations? Is that something that you know about? Did you guys like... The people's for it, right? Oh, look, they're hopping in the car. They're hopping in the car. Well, the van has officially pulled up. Now we're over here. Now we have followed the money. And here they go. Now they're bringing it all in. Look at this. Look at this. Where's this stuff going to? Anyone want to answer? Where's it going to next? They don't want to talk.
We're living a life in a complete op. And I was told 2 weeks, Joe, don't worry, it's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. And I truly believe that's going to happen. I believe President Trump is going to pull a lever. But I'm trying to figure out what lever. I mean, you probably want to figure out what lever as well. Tina Peters rots in jail. Tina Peters is 70 years old. And let me just give you guys, for those of you that don't know, Tina Peters was found guilty by a jury of her peers, right? But over 40 motions for her defenses, her affirmative defenses, were denied by the judge, not allowing them to hear information. Now, they also went back and asked the jury questions, and you're allowed to serve questions to the jury after the jury deliberates. And hey, if you knew this, this, and this, would have changed your mind? And they're like, yes, it would have. So we also had somebody that was in the jury that had something happen to their home, and they thought that it had to be someone related to Tina Peters that went and sabotaged their home. So they were pissed off. That actually happened. You had investigators that would call up people like Matt Crane and just do terrible things and say, hey, tell me how to debunk these these reports, these Mesa County reports, which, by the way, they've never debunked. They just walked past them and called things time drift. And I mean, just nonsense, utter nonsense. And the American people, these radical leftists, they seethe and they grab onto it. There's nothing to see here. And people that call themselves Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. Look, there is such a thing as playing for the other side so you could pretend, so you could be in opposition and you can stand in opposition to people having a voice. Well, let's talk about Matt Crane for a minute. Matt Crane is the head of the County Clerks and Recorders Association. His wife, who never used his last name, worked for Dominion for over 18 years, all the way back to when it was Sequoia Voting Systems. This is the same guy that stood up and said there's nothing to see here, that has bullied Tina, is the one that went out there and lied about Tina Peters and has defamed me and has defamed other people. A linchpin whose wife works for Dominion Voting Systems, the system that we have witnesses for and whistleblowers and information and reports and you name it. We have all the evidence that we need to show that the machines and the mail-in ballots are absolutely fraudulent, including the entire report we did on Raul. And what did they do to Raul over in Serbia? Romania? They threw him in jail. They threw him in jail. While all this is going on, Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, he came out and said, yeah, you know, I'm leaning towards clemency for Tina Peters. But here's what you don't know about her case. She had all of these charges. The max on those charges, I think, was 3 years, right? That Tina was sentenced for. Normally, that would be a concurrent sentence. They happen in the same area. You would not do consecutive. You wouldn't take those and you wouldn't stack them out so that you can actually give someone 20 years. And in this case, they took offenses. Even if you were to look at this with beer goggles and be an un-American traitor and allow for all the things the judge did, this sexual deviant Judge Barrett, even if you were to disallow everything and say, okay, I'm going to follow this through, the concurrent sentence in this case would have been 3 years. She would be out right now. She would be out. She would be out. But they stacked the charges on each other, which makes it so that she's not eligible to get out for 5 years into the sentence. 5 years. She's eligible in 2028 or 2029. And here's Jenna Griswold, the Secretary of State of Colorado, wrote a letter to Polis urging him not to release Tina and to bend to the president, and put it up right before bringing in Tina's hearing. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This was it put out yesterday? Yeah, it was put out yesterday. So I'm gonna play this for you, or read this to you. Can you make it bigger for me? On the other side. All right, there we go. This piece of trash starts off by saying we, like we meaning the demons that are connected to this criminal cartel. And it is a cartel. And the judges are the enforcers in the cartel. And she serves as the captain, telling the enforcers what to do, signaling to the enforcers not to let Tina out. President Trump should just go in and just take her out. Frankly, he should sign the Insurrection Act, and frankly, we should have 50,000 people arrested and tried in front of a military tribunal. That's what should happen. This is an insurrection. What we're in is an insurrection. And then we should reset what the media is allowed to put out there that is lies. And when they're found to have lied, the media company and the person that said it should be found guilty of sedition, because you're lying against the United States in order to create civil unrest. It's not protected by the First Amendment. It's like yelling fire in a theater. Here's what she writes. Governor Polis, we write to you to ask that you do not pardon Tina Peters or commute her sentence. What kind of piece of trash would you have to be? Well, you'd have to be a piece of trash like Jenna Griswold, someone that should be in prison right now, who will be arrested. You'd have to be someone like that to take a 70-year-old Gold Star mom and say you need to keep a 70-year-old woman
in prison. But see, that's what the devil does. In 2021, then clerk Tina Peters coordinated the breach of her own election equipment in the nation's first public election insider threat. Tina Peters granted unauthorized access to her county's voting equipment, and in doing so, she placed the security of Mesa County elections, the public's trust in democracy, at risk. So just so you know, she didn't interfere with any election. This piece of shit is a liar. Jenna Griswold is a threat to this country. None of what she just wrote there is true. None. It's not true. It's not true. She does not work for Jenna Griswold. Tina Peters is independent, and as a county clerk, she works for the people of Mesa County. The Secretary of State has no authority over Tina Peters. And that is the biggest problematic thing here, is that they don't have authority. You don't have authority. And she did not breach the equipment. She made a copy. She made a copy. Let me just be clear. She made a copy of the actual program, an image of the program, including all the data that was next to it, any programs that were used for it. She preserved information. She never breached anything. It was her equipment. It's her county. The people of Mesa County elected Tina Peters. They didn't elect the Secretary of State. They elected Tina Peters to run the elections. And when Tina Peters found out that there was a problem and that fraud was amiss, which she found found inside of the reports, she decided, nope, we're going to shut it down. And then we're going to use the full weight of Garland and the AG's office in order to persecute Tina Peters. Finish this letter. Peters was found guilty on 7 felonies and misdemeanors by a jury of her peers in conservative Mesa County. Today, she remains one of the only people to face real accountability for attacking American elections. She has taken no responsibility for her actions and has shown no remorse. The harm caused by Tina Peters has spread beyond the borders of Mesa County. Her actions have been repeatedly used to spread conspiracy theories, amplified falsehoods, and fuel dangerous election lies. This in turn has increased the threats to election officials and election infrastructure across our state. Releasing Tina Peters via pardon or commutation would validate her actions and embolden election denialism in Colorado and across the country. It would send a loud message to those who would attack our elections and democracy that they too may have immunity. It would also use the demoralizing message to those of us, send a demoralizing message to those of us who protect our elections and democracy, our county clerks, their staff, election judges, Secretary of State staff, and our work is meaningless. Caving to the demands of a vengeful president does not make our state or country better off. It encourages more vengeance. Please stand with us to the right side of history by upholding Colorado's laws and our democracy. Sincerely, Jenna Griswold. Okay, so I don't, are we ready to go? Are we ready to go? All right, let's go. We're going to skip me what I have to say about this, and we're going to get straight in. Let's go and listen to what they're saying at the trial.
To do when she suspects that the Secretary of State may be about to destroy digital election records stored on county computers that federal law requires the clerk to preserve. What should she do?
Counsel, can I just get a table setting question here? My understanding is that your contention of what the federal duty was under the federal statute is preservation of election records for 22 months. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's also my understanding that several days before anything occurred with the trusted build, one or more forensic copies of the election records had been made and retained. Is that correct?
One copy was made on May 23rd,
okay.
2 days before the trusted build.
Okay, so 2 days before the trusted build, a copy was made and retained. Correct. And that Ms. Peters was not charged with any criminal conduct for making or retaining that copy. Am I correct?
That's correct, because it was completely legal to make the copy, which
right.
the state acknowledges.
Which is fine, which is why she wasn't charged. So
correct.
Why didn't that fully discharge her federal duty to the extent that it was to preserve election records?
Sure. Because she didn't know what the government what the Secretary of State was going to do to the county computers during this so-called trusted build.
But what would it matter if she had a forensic copy of what the computer looked like before that she has
Because
retained
she's
and preserved?
responsible for protecting the records.
Because you'd have to
Not just
tell someone about
preserving
it.
them, but for seeing what happens to them. And she's not a computer expert. So what does she do? She knows what she knew at the time. She learned from the Dominion tech rep, David Stahl. He told her the QR code's going to be deleted. Well, why is that important? The QR code reads ballots. It processes a certain kind of ballot. So without the QR code, you can't process those ballots. That means, number one, 52 USC 20701 had been violated because that QR code was deleted. And number two, it means you can't do an audit of the prior elections without the QR code.
But why wasn't that preserved in the forensic copy that had been made 2 days before? Because isn't the forensic copy that was made an unalterable exact copy of
Yes.
what was on the system? So
Yes.
why didn't that preserve those records to be able to have that audit trail?
Well, if the QR code was there, it was preserved in the forensic image.
Right. But wasn't the forensic
she
injury?
still didn't know. She still didn't know what the Secretary of State was going to do exactly. The Secretary of State might have just deleted the QR code and left all the other data on the computers. When you get a Windows.
Did Ms. Peters have custody or control of that copy, of that forensic copy?
She did until it was FedExed to Hayes on the 26th or 27th.
Did she ever turn that copy over to the Secretary of State, according to the record?
No.
So at all times, she had possession, custody, or control of that forensic copy?
From the time she got it and sent it to Hayes, she did. After that, he had custody of it.
But she could have gotten it back from him if she'd requested it.
Good question. I don't know the answer.
Can I roll us back just one step behind that? You acknowledge here that the argument with respect to the scope of the duty is the language of the statute, which is retain and preserve the records. What are we to do with the fact that at trial, when the jury instruction was requested on preservation, and the court essentially raised the same question that Judge Welling just asked, is it wasn't that duty discharged? Trial counsel said, well, we're not talking about preservation, we're talking about investigation. Does the preservation argument, is that abandoned? Is it waived at this point?
No.
Why not?
Because she has a duty to preserve under the federal statute. What counsel meant was, we're not talking about imaging the system 2 days ago. We're talking about investigating what the Secretary of State's about to do to county records that are her responsibility under federal law. And she has a duty to investigate that.
Where does the duty to investigate arise? It's not specified in Section 20701.
Well, it's not prohibited either.
It may not be prohibited, but what gave her an affirmative duty to investigate?
Because she had to find out what was going to happen to the record she's responsible for. And she is not a computer expert. So what does she do? She asks the IT department. This is Exhibit 19.
But it sounds like you're conceding she didn't have a duty under any law to conduct the investigation. I'm looking at Section 20701. I don't see any reference to investigate or investigation in the federal statute.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sure, I don't see a reference to it in the statute. So please help me where that legal duty came from.
Well, it's true that 20701 doesn't say investigate, but she has a duty to protect and preserve those records. So she has to find out what's going to happen to them.
But she had that. She had the forensic copy.
She had the forensic image, yes. So she needs to find out what the Secretary of State is going to do to her county records that she's responsible for.
And this is all part and parcel of your Supremacy Clause immunity argument, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so in order to have a supremacy clause argument, you have to have a federal duty, and that this was in furtherance of that federal duty,
Sure.
right? And
Yes.
you're saying that she was investigating, and I think one of the reasons the trial court rejected the supremacy clause argument is that's not within the scope of her federal obligation, and I also didn't see you continuing to advance here the investigation theory as to what she was doing. So the court, is my understanding, is the court refused that defense on the grounds that investigation wasn't part of her obligations. Is that?
I thought what he said is she had no authority to investigate. That's my memory of it. Could be wrong, but he said you don't have any authority to investigate. But she does have the authority to investigate. Just like if you found out that one of your judges, a clerk came in and said, I just saw a guy show up with an envelope that had 10 $1,000 bills in it and hand it to a judge on the Court of Appeals, you would have a duty to ask more questions.
But for purposes of the immunity argument, isn't there an important distinction between whether she had authority, perhaps as the clerk and recorder, and whether she had an affirmative duty under federal law to investigate?
And to tack on to that, because if she just executed a duty but didn't commit a crime, she investigated, but in the course of investigating, she violated a state criminal law. And she is contending with the immunity argument is, notwithstanding having violated the state law, I am immune from prosecution under that state law because I have this duty. So just because she can do certain things, that doesn't necessarily come within the scope of the immunity. The immunity is, you were doing something that the federal statute says you have to do, and doing that made you violated the state law. The immunity doesn't extend to all things that you may be permitted to do, does it?
Well, I think it extends to finding out what's going to happen during the so-called trusted build, which turned out to be a wipe. The Secretary of State came in and deleted 29,000 files that were part of the 2020 election records, and did that in 62 counties in Colorado.
Do you have any legal authority for the argument that under either Section 207 or any federal statute, that someone situated like Ms. Peters had a duty to investigate? I'm still struggling with where that duty to investigate came from under federal law.
Because they're her records. She has to protect them. So she wants to find out what's going to happen to them. It's just like the trial court saying, well, you could have sent the machines to Denver. You could have canceled the trusted build. That's not an option either, because if they go to Denver, she doesn't know what's going to happen to them.
My understanding is you argued below that there was a duty to investigate, and that is what triggered the supremacy clause immunity. But to us, I'm reading you as saying that it is preserve and retain that is what that duty was, and that she was carrying that out. Is it one or is it both? Or
Well, if you say that if you say that it's different to see what happens to your records than to preserve and protect them, I guess that's a difference. But she didn't see a difference.
Okay.
How could there be a difference? This judge is, I swear to you, how could there be a difference? How could you make a copy of both sides and it not be a difference?
I got a note that I can't understand.
I think my clerks say that all the time when I give that note. So,
how can you not investigate and find out whether or not they altered the records, which is against the law?
As Mr. Tickton has pointed out to me,
oh my gosh,
there's a hard drive copy, but she needs to know what's in her computer and what's gone after the trusted build. The only way to do that is to bring an expert into the build.
But isn't a forensic copy a clone of what's on a computer, on a hard drive? It's the same thing that could be found on the election machines. So,
well, it's supposed to be, But if you don't stand there and observe what happens during the trusted build, you don't know what happened to make the change. And that's why she needed an expert in there. So she did 5 things, 5 legal things to fulfill her federal duty. And central to this argument is who's in charge of the premises. So the people claim that the Secretary of State is the clerk's boss, and that the Secretary of State can dictate who is present during
Counsel,
the wedding.
can I push back on this just a little bit?
Sure.
She wasn't charged with having an unauthorized person present. As I understand it, she was on notice that the Secretary of State would not conduct the trusted build in the presence of a member of the public or somebody who wasn't an employee.
That's not true.
And so it's not a question of whether she was authorized to bring somebody in. It's a question of whether or not she was deceptive towards a public official such that they would then choose to go forward with an activity that she was on notice that they otherwise wouldn't have. She wasn't charged with bringing an unauthorized person in. She was charged with lying about who that was in order to get the Secretary of State to take an official action, namely actually doing the trusted build in that person's presence.
Well, Your Honor, I have a question for you. If she wasn't charged with bringing in an unauthorized person, why did the prosecutor say over and over and over in opening statement, while witnesses were on the stand, and in closing argument, that she brought an unauthorized person into the room?
Well, you can't establish again, the allegation was that the offense is based on the misrepresentation of the status of that person.
Right.
You can't establish the status of that person without talking about whether they were authorized or not.
Correct.
Right? So
she brought in a person who she knew in whose presence the trusted build would not have taken place.
So you're basically saying
is that fair?
I don't understand your question.
That's what I gathered that from the response on your face. She brought in somebody that she knew, if the Secretary of State was aware of who it was, the trusted build would not have occurred in that person's presence.
Well,
is that correct?
If the Secretary of State did what they said they were going to do, yes.
Right.
So here's why it was reasonable and necessary to bring that person in.
Reasonable and necessary to what?
To perform her federal duty.
All right.
Okay. So she needs to see what's going to happen to the county records that she's responsible for. And what was observed by the expert that she brought in, because IT would not furnish an expert. What was observed was Danny Casillas deleting 29,000 records, files of the 2020 election, which violates the federal statute. So that's why it was necessary for Hayes to be there to see this. And she had a right to bring him in. That's no longer disputed. But during the trial, they kept saying he was unauthorized. But she authorized him to be there. And she had authority to authorize him under Rule 20.5.3b.
Then why didn't she just say to the Secretary of State, I know you told me not to have anybody who isn't a county employee, but this person is not a county employee and he's going to be here because I authorize him to be here. Instead of saying, oh, no, this is a county employee, and lying about who he was.
Because if the trusted bill doesn't go down, then she can't conduct the election. That's her understanding. And then the machines will have to go to Denver, and she won't be able to see what happened to them.
So in other words, she wanted to trick the Secretary of State into going forward.
She needed to, in order to have Hayes present. It was reasonable because there was no harm caused by Hayes being there. The computers work fine. When
She wasn't charged with destruction of county equipment or, I mean, the harm here, the crime was that the misrepresentation of who he was led to an official act. That's the attempt to influence a public official part of this. That's what she was charged with, not that she destroyed computer equipment or did any sort of property destruction.
Well, I understand that's the people's theory, but this case was all about elections until the trial. And when the judge wouldn't allow any evidence in about elections, and the people objected to any evidence about elections. But before the trial, it was all about elections. The judge found that the clerk tampered with her own equipment. He made that finding.
Based on the specific charges, which are violations of state law, how would evidence of, say, election fraud have been a defense to the charges brought under the state statutes?
It's chicken and egg.
I'm sorry, Judge, I don't understand your question.
So the trial court said, Ms. Peters, you can't bring in evidence that you believe there was election fraud.
Right.
How was that evidence relevant to the specific charges, which were violations of state criminal statutes?
Well, here's the relevance. The election fraud actually happened when the Secretary of State erased the 2020 election records in 62 counties. And hopefully the federal government is going to do something about that very soon.
Under what legal theory would that be a defense to the violations of the state criminal statutes?
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Please, go ahead.
One of those 62 counties was Mesa. Those are her records. And she's got a duty to prevent their destruction.
So is it a necessity defense? What is the legal nature of that defense to the state charges?
That she was performing a public duty, executing a public duty.
A public duty or a federal or a duty under federal law?
Both. She's executing a public duty. It's her job as the clerk to protect those records and to make sure she knows what's happening to them. So she needs a witness to say what is going to happen during the trusted build and what did happen.
Why couldn't that witness have been Ms. Brown or somebody who works for her?
They don't know how to use the system.
They didn't have the technical expertise.
Oh my gosh.
To do it.
I want to go back to the duty issue. It seems to me that the duty argument goes to immunity under the supremacy clause. But I need your help in explaining how the existence of that duty under Colorado law would have been a defense, an affirmative defense to the state criminal charges.
Well, because all she needs is a reasonable belief that what she was doing was necessary and that she used reasonable means to achieve that objective.
There's both an objective and subjective requirement of that, right? Her belief and the sincerity of her belief is necessary but not sufficient, right? It also had to be a reasonable understanding of what her federal duty was, and that would be a question of law that presumably at this point it's up to us to answer. Is that fair?
Well, our position is that state courts have no jurisdiction to determine supremacy clause immunity.
Let's talk about that. Sure. Then who would decide that?
Federal court.
But you didn't seek to remove this to federal court, did you?
No, because she's not a person who's entitled to do that under the removal statute.
But state courts, the case law is replete with state courts resolving these questions of supremacy clause immunity, correct?
The federal cases say that the Tinella especially says state courts can't decide this.
How does a court not have not only the authority but the duty to determine whether it has jurisdiction over the case before it?
Well, assuming you're correct, and I understand you disagree with our argument that they didn't have jurisdiction, but assuming that they have jurisdiction to decide it, then they have to follow the rules. The rule is if there's a disputed fact, you have to have a hearing. No hearing was held. So the factual record to support what she did was never made. It wasn't allowed to be made.
So, but I want to go back to your jurisdictional question first, because you are contending that the state court had no jurisdiction to decide whether or not she was protected by supremacy clause immunity, right?
Yes.
Then she gets charged by the people with state law crimes.
Yes.
And she contends that she is immune from prosecution under the supremacy clause.
Yes.
Who decides if she's right?
And how? How does it get there?
Well, we filed a DEC action in federal court, and they said the state, and the judge said, no, the state court can decide that. Your case is dismissed. 10th Circuit affirmed. So if the trial court had jurisdiction, then he needed to conduct an evidentiary hearing, which he didn't do.
So despite the fact that you filed a DEC action in federal court, the federal district judge said, you're wrong, the state court can handle it. You appealed that to the 10th Circuit, and the 10th Circuit said, you're wrong, the state court can handle it. You're still pursuing the argument before us that the state court couldn't handle it.
Yes.
Are you arguing that we don't have jurisdiction to consider the immunity issue?
Well, yes, but I know that you disagree with it.
Well, no.
No.
Actually, the problem with your argument is if you're right, then we just can't decide it, and doesn't the conviction just stand? I mean, I guess I'm not sure you really want what you're asking for, us to decline to exercise jurisdiction. Then the conviction stays. I think what you're asking us is to find that the trial court erred in its substantive determination that she didn't have that immunity, not that nobody can decide it, because you're arguing that she has it, and you want us to so conclude, don't you?
Well, let me put it this way. We're not waiving the argument that state courts don't have jurisdiction to decide this. I'll call it the Tonella argument.
Okay.
But assuming that state courts do, then you need to follow the rules.
Okay.
The trial court didn't follow the rules. He didn't hold an evidentiary hearing.
I just want to stress, to follow up on Judge Welling, we have to make a threshold determination of whether we have jurisdiction. And it sounds to me like you're saying we don't have jurisdiction. And if we agree with you, as Judge Welling said, we have no choice but to conclude we have no jurisdiction, and therefore the appeal is dismissed.
Well, the trial court never had jurisdiction either. So the case is gone now.
So who would tell the trial court that if not us?
Well, I think you have to.
Okay.
But you're telling us we don't have authority to rule. How can we tell the trial court they didn't have jurisdiction?
Do we or do we not have jurisdiction? It's a yes or no question.
You seem to want us to give us jurisdiction to do something.
If the 10th Circuit's correct, you have jurisdiction.
Okay.
How's that?
Fair enough, counsel.
All right. Now, so can I turn now in the time remaining to the trial court errors?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please. Okay, so the law on affirmative defenses is if there's a scintilla of evidence in the record to support an affirmative defense, the trial court has to give the instruction.
Only if there's a legal basis for the defense, right?
Correct.
Would you agree that?
Right. So here there were two affirmative defenses, which the trial court decided before trial he was not going to instruct the jury on, regardless of what the evidence was. This is page 3370 of the trial court file. He says, I'm not going to give an instruction on execution of a public duty or immunity. So no matter what the evidence was, she wasn't going to get the instruction that the Idrago and Cassell's cases say she was entitled to.
Well, that circles back to where we started, the table setting, as Judge Welling suggested. And I guess I'll just kind of recap. If the world is as premised in that question, that backing up the records with a forensic copy would preserve the records, right? And the idea being you create a forensic copy, which is a clone. Let's say, unrelated to any of the allegations, let's say the server blows up, you get a new server, you're able to replace those records with that clone, correct? That's what a forensic copy does.
Assuming that the forensic copy had all the information and assuming you could back it up, yes.
And that's not being challenged here. You're conceding that the forensic copy was a clone.
I've never seen it, so I don't. And
well,
no one ever
whether you're conceding, you're not asserting that it wasn't. I don't see any. Okay.
No.
So, if as the premise of that question suggests, the backing up of the records preserved the records, the duty was done. What other than that? What evidence was there to warrant the execution of a public duty defense? And I understand you don't agree that satisfied the duty, but if it did, is there anything else in the record that would amount to a scintilla of evidence warranting the instruction?
A crime was committed by the Secretary of State.
Well, she had a duty to see what happened to the records that she was responsible for. The only way to do that is to bring an expert into the trusted build.
What they're basically saying is that you cannot
closing,
have
the prosecutor
an investigation
tells the jury that
the theory was right.
That Dr. Frank told this to the clerk, quote, "That would be illegal, but I have the best guy in the country," close quote. So what that told the jury was, which was a misquote of the witness, by the way, but what it told the jury was, Clerk Peters knew that it would be illegal to bring an expert into the room, and she did it anyway.
And this is
but
your prosecutorial misconduct argument,
yes,
and
exactly.
And that was not objected to when it was said. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We think it meets the Tardif test for
plain error. Very good. And I just remind you have about 2.5 minutes left. I don't know if you want to reserve some time for rebuttal.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Case. Ms. Michaels.
Thank you. May it please the court. I'm Lisa Michaels, registration number 38949. Tina Peters was not a federal official. She was a state official who was prosecuted by the state for deceiving state and local officials so she could get an outsider into the state's trusted build process. She had a duty to preserve federal election records, but that's not what was happening here. Here, she hatched a scheme to deceive state and local officials so she could circumvent the state's security protocols for the trusted build. That's what she was charged with. She wasn't charged with copying the election server. And we don't agree that her duty to preserve records included a duty to copy the election server, but even if it did, she didn't need her plot of deception to do that.
Why wouldn't it? In fact, wasn't she instructed, or not she specifically, but didn't the messaging from the Secretary of State's office to all the clerks say, back everything up before we come? Isn't that how they preserve these records? I mean, they have a federal duty to preserve records for 22 months. We have elections more often than that would warrant. So isn't the standard practice they do these backups and then they update the machinery for the next election?
Yes, I'm not sure. I want to make sure I answer your question. I agree with what you just said, but
But you seem to be hesitating to even concede that making the backup was okay, even though she wasn't charged with it. That seems a little...
Well, she wasn't charged with it, and obviously I'm not the trial prosecutor, but I think we don't agree that there was that duty, that was legal for her to do that. But that's not something that she was charged with. And so for purposes of talking about it, we can say that she copied the records, but that wasn't, and so maybe we could even just assume that that met the federal duty, but I'm sorry, let me back up. So, yeah, sorry, I was on the right track. So let's say that did satisfy the, just for sake of argument, that did satisfy, sorry, I feel like this is a little bit sounding off. Does that sound okay to you guys?
I think we can hear you pretty well. Can the audience hear her? Okay, I'm getting nods, so.
Okay, good, thank you. And so, but what she didn't need to do, so her plot of deception was designed to get this outsider into the trusted build. She didn't need to deceive the state and local officials in order to copy the election server. So if we just assume that was part of her duty, she could have done that because she did do it outside of the trusted build. She did it before the trusted build occurred, and she did it after the trusted build occurred. So she had copies from what it looked like before and what it looked like after, and no one was around when those copies were made, so she didn't have to deceive. She didn't have to get those security credentials.
But even more to the point, she wasn't charged with any conduct related to copying before or copying after, as I understand the charges. What she was charged with was misleading members of her office and folks in the Secretary of State's office that would lull them into performing the trusted build in her presence, with full knowledge that had she been truthful, it would not have happened there in her office. Presumably, the machines would have been sent to Denver to do the trusted build. Am I missing the mark at all?
No, I agree with you. That's exactly right. She wasn't charged with making the copies. She was charged for deceiving the state and local officials.
So under the federal statute, section 20701, she had a duty to retain and preserve all records and papers relating to the election. And that presumably would include the official hard drive in Mesa County. Let's assume that the Secretary of State was in cahoots with Dominion, and Ms. Peters knew that the Secretary of State was going to monkey with the records, was going to monkey with those records she had a duty to retain and preserve. What was she supposed to do if she couldn't trust the Secretary of State?
Well, she did it. She made copies of the records, what they looked like before the trusted build
All
happened.
records and papers, whether they're copies or not. Would you concede all means all? Every single copy, even if there was a forensic copy, all also included.
All means all.
The version of that hard drive that the Secretary of State had access to. And under I'll call it a hypothetical, what if she knew that the Secretary of State was going to illegally modify the records and papers that she had a duty to retain and preserve? What was she supposed to do?
Well, so you're saying, like, if there was a concern that the build would wipe out those records, is that what you're?
It did wipe out those records.
To me, she has the copy of what the
More than that the records would be falsified.
Well, I think having a copy of the election server before, again, we don't agree that was permissible for her to do, or that she was obligated to do that by her duty, but she had a copy of what it looked like before.
But all means all, doesn't it? It means every single copy, the original, every copy of that hard drive.
As far as I know, I think we're talking about the copy that was made before the trusted build and the copy after the trusted build. Is that, just so we're on the same page, is that what we're talking about? Or
she's trying to
think there's another record?
I think all records and papers would include the records and papers that were the official election records in Mesa County that the Secretary of State was going to gain access to, right?
Yes, I think we're on the same. I think we agree.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, her bringing the person into the trusted build, that was. Her plot of deception was done so that she could bring that person in to observe the build. Copying the election records before, after, whenever, that's separate.
What should she have done if she believed that the records are going to be illegally tampered with by the Secretary of State?
I think she could have made the copies, and not that, again, not conceding that that's legal, but there was another clerk in, I think it's Elbert County, and that's what that person did. He made copies of the election server.
And then the Secretary of State destroyed it.
Retained them. He was not prosecuted because he didn't engage in deception.
And I want to keep going back. You keep saying we're not conceding that she was entitled to do it. Judge Tao asked, I thought there was a directive that came out from the Secretary of State that said, before we do the trusted build, back up your records.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. There are a couple different things at play. So there are the election records that the Secretary of State's office told her office to back up, and that all of the clerks are obligated to do that, and they did do it, and that's what one of our witnesses confirmed, that was done before that's why, and they want to do it because the update does replace the information that's on the server, and so they're required to make a copy of the election records. So there's the forensic copy, and I don't claim to be a technical expert on these issues, so the forensic copy, to the extent that it's different than those election records that the Secretary of State's office directed
Okay,
her office
let me
to-
maybe try this. The Secretary of State's office told her to copy the record, so the data. But what the forensic copy does is gets both the data and like operating software and everything. It's an entire clone, and you're not conceding one way or the other whether a full clone that included presumably some proprietary software was or wasn't legal. But it doesn't matter because she copied that, and she's not charged with having done that, regardless of whether or not you're willing to concede that that sort of copy was legal. Is that?
That's exactly
Okay.
right.
Let me, you say that she is not entitled to assert federal supremacy clause immunity at all because of who she is.
That's one of the arguments.
It is one of the arguments, but I want to test that a little bit, and that's distinct from what she was doing wasn't within the scope of any immunity she might have had. That's a different thing. I mean, if your argument is she could have potentially had some immunity for some conduct, but this isn't within the scope of that, that's one argument. But I want to test the notion that she could never assert it. What if Colorado had a statute that says election records shall be preserved for 12 months, and after that time must be disposed of, and retaining a copy of those after 12 months is unlawful? And she, as the chief election officer in Mesa County, saw that stat, and that retaining those records is class 1 misdemeanor. She sees that statute, but she decides, I have to retain the election records for 22 months. So I have a federal obligation, I'm going to break the state law, and then when she's charged, why couldn't she say, I am acting pursuant to a federal statute, and therefore I have supremacy clause immunity for taking this conduct? Because I don't think the supremacy clause immunity is limited to federal employees or federal agents. It also, in some cases, seems to extend to people discharging a duty imposed by federal law. So would she not be able to assert the immunity under those circumstances?
So if we're setting aside the argument that you have to be a federal official, employee, or officer, if we're just talking about whether the duty would, I mean, really then the question is, was her conduct necessary to fulfill that duty?
And that would be a jury question, wouldn't it?
No, I mean, if we're talking about, I think you're getting at the affirmative defense, but please correct me if I'm wrong. It's not a jury question because, well, I guess, are we talking about the hypothetical, or are we talking about what actually happened? If we're talking about the facts of the case, it's not a jury question because that duty did not, the question actually for the affirmative defense is even more narrow than the supremacy clause issue, because the language of the affirmative defense, the duty or law has to require or authorize the criminal conduct. So she had to have some evidence that a duty required or authorized her to deceive state and local officials. Excuse me for just one moment.
Not entirely, right? Let's move away from the attempt to influence public servant and go to the official misconduct. And let me say, for the sake of discussion, the battle over the evidence of her intent conflates the concept of intent with motive. I'm going to state that as a premise. But even her motive, it may not be relevant to the official misconduct or the attempt to influence a public servant charge, because what she had to intend to do for that crime was deceive someone and affect that public official's decision. But the official misconduct charge was charged as with the intent to receive a benefit for herself. Why is it not relevant to the jury for her to say, I didn't intend to receive a benefit for myself, I intended to do what I thought was my job and protect the election process? Why was that evidence not relevant, at least to that charge?
Well, I think, and I could be wrong, my understanding was that the theory that was, and I don't know, again, I don't have the indictment right in front of me, but my understanding was that and I think actually there's the interrogatories reflect what the basis of that charge was and what the jury verdict was. And I think it wasn't based on the benefit to herself, but it was based on the violating the election, the state Secretary of State's rules. And so I think it's a little bit different. but I think it's the same idea. And those rules, by the way, just to put it out there, are about access and access to that secure room and keep maintaining logs of who's coming and going. So it's the security protocols, essentially. So, okay, sorry. And so I don't think I mean, I think it's still the same. Even if she had this motive, I think it's still, her intent is still to violate the security protocol. I mean, there are different things charged here. We have the attempt to influence, the conspiracy to commit criminal impersonation and violating these security protocol rules. But it's really all the same. It's part of this scheme of deception. That is what she was charged. That all of it relates to that. And so her intent there, even if she had a motive, she has a motive to conceal this outsider's identity, or she has a motive to preserve whatever that she thinks she's preserving election records. She still has that doesn't take away. It doesn't negate the intent that she had. She still, because she had that motive, she had the intent to deceive, to engage in this plot of deception.
But engaging in the plot of deception has no bearing on the charge of first-degree official misconduct. And I'll have to explore the indictment a little more closely. But I am presently under the impression that the charge was based on the elements of that being an intent to obtain a benefit for herself.
Or someone else.
Or someone else. So if her argument, even if it wouldn't fly with the jury, if her argument was, my intent wasn't to benefit myself, my intent was to protect the election process, while that would have no bearing on whether the felony charges that require only an intent to deceive, the first-degree official misconduct elements don't have anything to do with an intent to deceive. They have to do with an intent to gain a benefit. Why was that evidence not appropriately submitted to a jury?
I'm sorry. Let me get in front of the microphone. I'm sorry. If I can just have a moment to look at the jury instruction on that, because I don't have. I guess my first response, without pulling this out, just to verify, is that the intent doesn't necessarily go to that benefit. It would go to the conduct. Did she intend to engage in that conduct? And so there's the intent, of course, applies to the different elements. And so it would apply to, it wouldn't negate her intent to engage in the conduct that constituted
That's
violation.
That's not the standard.
Or is this the...
So here's the charge for you.
Official misconduct.
Honor about the dates in question, Tina Peters, a public servant, with intent to obtain a benefit for any person.
It never happened.
It does directly apply.
Oh, no, but sorry, could you keep, so there's other, I guess what I'm getting at is what the actus reus is. And so that's the part where the intent,
that's not the standard by which the charges are filed.
But again, if there's a specific intent crime, which this is, the prosecution has to prove that specific intent. The intent to obtain a benefit for any person or maliciously cause harm to another. And she says, even if I did what I did, my intent wasn't that, and here's the evidence of that. The jury has to hear that evidence to be able to determine whether the prosecution proved the charge.
Well, the jury did hear
that
evidence. There was ample evidence admitted, and I cited it in the brief. I have the citations here too, if that's helpful, but that evidence did come in. I mean, the court limited it because the court was ensuring that it didn't turn into a mini trial about...
So is that a 403 ruling instead of 401 ruling? I mean, is it a relevance as opposed to, or is it undue prejudice
yes.
as opposed to 403 being undue prejudice?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, does a trial court, with you were about to make an analogy of the sideshow overcoming the circus. When it comes to a defendant's constitutional right to present a complete defense, does a trial court have the ability to curtail that in the interests of not letting the sideshow overcome the circus? Don't they have a constitutional right to present a complete defense? And the only restriction on that I think is out there is that means the court can prevent cumulative or irrelevant evidence, but it cannot curtail the presentation of relevant evidence.
Well, I think, I'm not sure if you disagree. Our argument is that the danger of unfair prejudice, confusion of the issues, or misleading the jury substantially outweighs any probative value.
How do you
outweigh?
Is that the basis of the court's ruling?
That is the basis of the court's ruling, yes. And if we're talking about so there's no error because of that. That is the basis of the ruling. But even if there was some sort of finding that the court should have let that in, it's not a constitutional violation because she was permitted to bring some of that evidence in, and she vigorously cross-examined the evidence. It's only if she's prevented from
a complete deprivation of presenting the defense
that
rises to constitutional.
Is that the Cutzinger language?
Correct. Yes.
What do you do about the fact about I can't remember it was actually a later proceeding in Cutzinger itself at the habeas level. Judge Kane at the federal court strongly challenged the validity of that statement, that goes way too far, that it doesn't have to be a complete deprivation, because that essentially shifts the burden to the defendant to defend their constitutional rights instead of to the people to protect them.
I'm not familiar with the continuation of that case into habeas, but I will say that wouldn't be binding on this court. We have to rely on Cutzinger because that's the case law that applies for us since we're in state court.
Can you come back to my hypothetical very briefly?
Yes.
Could she have asserted under the circumstances of my hypothetical a supremacy clause immunity defense?
Oh, right. And if you could remind me exactly. So you're saying, let me just offer if I understand. It sounds like you're saying that, I don't remember the details, but it sounds like you're saying if the state law directly conflicts with. Yeah. Yeah, I think if that's, again, setting aside the argument that she has to be a federal official, I think that it seems to me, I mean, again, you have to engage in the analysis of whether it was necessary. So then you're looking at, is this the only way to achieve that duty? And so, again, without remembering the specific details, and that would take us, pretty far afield.
And maybe what but you still seem to be maintaining that she can't assert supremacy clause immunity at all. Full stop. She is not, by virtue of her position, she's just not entitled to do it. That's your first line position, right?
Yes. Yes. Our argument is that she has to be a federal official in order to assert that. But if you don't agree with that, given the facts of this case, that she didn't need to engage in that criminal conduct, the deception, in order to.
But we only get to that question if she's able to assert it, though, right?
Yes, exactly.
Is it fair to say that while there may be a supremacy clause issue between the conflicting statutes, she would have an affirmative defense of the public duty, but not an immunity?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
In his hypothetical, she might still have an affirmative defense that I was executing my public duty.
Oh.
But that doesn't mean she's immune.
Yes, I think that would fit better in that. I mean, really if we're talking about the affirmative defense, really what that defense is available for is the situation where you have some sort of where the law says this is a crime, but then you have some other duty that requires you to do it. Like we have the case where the process server can assert that defense for the crime of trespassing. So that yes, I think the hypothetical would fit into that.
So it would be the state law affirmative defense, not the supremacy clause immunity, because you contend that she's just it's not available to her as a state official. Fair enough?
Yeah, for your hypothetical.
If it's okay with my colleagues, can we turn to sentencing?
Yes. Actually, I was hoping to address the substantive charge of
Go ahead.
Conspiracy to commit criminal impersonation.
Okay.
That charge was identified in the indictment as a Class 1 felony or a Class 6 felony under the statute subparagraph was identified in the indictment as a Class 1 felony or a Class 6 felony under the statute subparagraph 1A. Mm-hmm. But the language of the charge actually parroted 1B, which was a Class 1 misdemeanor.
Correct.
And your argument is, to the extent that was error, that convicting her of a Class 6 felony was error, it was harmless error because the evidence was sufficient.
Plain error, but yes.
So I want to state a hypothetical. A person is charged with second-degree murder, which is a Class 2 felony under 18-3103, that they knowingly caused the death.
I'm sorry, can you just start over? I wanted to correct I got caught up because I wanted to just clarify, since harmless and plain error kind of opposite. Our argument
You're saying it's not
it's
reversible.
Correct,
that's the key.
Correct, but under the plain error standard, not the harmless error
That's
standard.
the key. So the point. My point is, you're saying it's not reversible even if it's error.
Correct.
And I want to say, as a hypothetical, somebody's charged with knowingly causing the death of another under 18-3103, a Class 2 felony, second-degree murder. Mm-hmm. It is charged in the complaint and information, or the indictment if it was a grand jury, as homicide, citing the first-degree murder statute and calling it an F1, even though the language was of the Class 2 felony. You go to trial, and there's evidence of after intent and or with intent and after deliberation, which is what makes it a first-degree murder. But they were charged with, the jury was instructed on, and the jury found guilty on the language of a Class 2 felony. Is it your position that a person can still be convicted of a crime with which they were never charged and with which the jury was never instructed, as long as the evidence is sufficient?
Yes, I think that is what the case law indicates, that if it's just, in this case, I'll just point out too that, I don't have the language of the statutes that you're citing in your hypothetical, but it was one word, might, and it was already...
Yeah, but that one word distinguishes it from a felony to a misdemeanor.
And this case made an extra sentence, 15 more months in the Department of Corrections, that couldn't have been given had it been a misdemeanor conviction. It clearly affects a substantial right.
And I'll just say, I'm confused as to why the people are continuing to maintain that the proper remedy on this isn't to enter the conviction for the misdemeanor, because the indictment used the word might, and the jury was instructed on that, so that's what the verdict is. I am baffled as to the position that's being taken that we can somehow overlook that and still enter the felony because the evidence that was presented at trial would have supported the felony. Are you still maintaining that position in front of us here today?
Yes, that is our position.
What case law supports that argument?
I'm sorry?
What case law supports that argument?
I've cited it in my brief. I don't have it right in front of me, but the case...
It's the omitted elements
yes,
case
correct.
law, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just where the element was omitted, and but the element that was omitted wasn't in dispute. Here, the jury was affirmatively misinstructed. It was instructed on the misdemeanor, and it found her guilty of that misdemeanor beyond a reasonable doubt. This isn't the omission of an element. This is a misinstructed jury. How can we correct that by saying, no, we'll just assume that because she could have also been convicted of the felony, we enter that even though we don't have a jury verdict? That's a...
I understand it's a difficult position for the people to be in. But
it's not a position you have to take.
But thank you. But I do believe that the omitted element language applies because, to me, I understand. I can hear from the way you're talking about it that it seems more egregious to add this extra word than it is to omit an element. But to me, omitting an element is a pretty big deal, and the fact that can be
except in those cases, at least the person was originally charged with the elemental language. Here, never on the table.
That is true, but if I can just add, and again, it seems that I will not be able to convince you, but I just want to put my argument out there, which is that there wasn't a confusion from the parties about what they were talking about, because the correct statutory citation was used, so they were on notice of the statutory citation. The language was incorrect, but the statutory citation was correct.
Couldn't that also mean that the prosecution was on notice that they'd only charged, since the language was correct, they'd only charged that language and not, both of them were on notice of something wrong.
Oh, yes, I guess what I'm saying, Your Honor, is just that there wasn't a notice problem because there was the statutory citation, and the parties treated it as though, I think it was an oversight. I think everybody believed that if they had charged and used the language that's what the record bears out, in my estimation. But I understand I'm not going to convince you. I just wanted to put that is the argument.
I'd like to turn to the sentencing issue. We'd like to hear argument on the sentencing issue. So the trial court in sentencing referred to Ms. Peters peddling snake oil that's been proven to be junk. She tried to undermine the election and she was weaving tales. Didn't he consider uncharged conduct as he referred, given the references to snake oil, etc.? Wasn't he considering uncharged conduct in sentencing her, and wasn't that an error?
Well, are we talking about the First Amendment issue? I'm not sure that is, it hasn't been raised, but I understand that if it's a concern to the court. I don't think that that's something I don't think that that's something that's problematic. I mean, all of that was part and parcel of, it was the context of the criminal conduct. She wanted to promote these allegations of election fraud, and her scheme of deception, everything she did.
But she wasn't convicted of publicly saying it was election fraud.
Correct, but I think because it's the context, it's relevant. I think it's something that the court can consider.
Why is the context relevant when the court excluded much of the evidence of election fraud? So on one hand, the judge says, Ms. Peters, you can't bring this in. On the other hand, he refers to it when he's sentencing her.
Well, and again, I know the court is aware of this, but if I can I just want to make sure the record is clear that he didn't exclude it entirely. He limited it. Yes, he did. But also she spent a great deal of time at the sentencing hearing talking about this election fraud. She used it as a platform to make all of these allegations. So of course it was relevant to what the court was doing at the sentencing hearing. The court was entitled to consider what she said.
Well, then let's turn this as a First Amendment issue, is that the court's entitled to consider the larger context, but there's some limitations to that, right? The court cannot punish her for the exercise of her First Amendment rights. Isn't that a fair statement as a broad principle?
I think that's correct. I mean, if the court can consider the conduct and it may factor into the sentencing, just to break that down a little bit. I mean, I think the broad proposition is correct that we can't punish people except in these circumstances, which we're not talking about right now. But I think to the extent that it is relevant then the court can consider it and factor it into its sentencing decision.
But that's the question, is does her political or personal views, is it relevant? Or is it something that is inappropriately considered? And I guess I would also frame it as, in defending the convictions and what testimony was brought in at trial and what defenses she could assert, the people very narrowly tailor this to, we're not talking about her election conspiracy stuff. We're not talking about making the copy before or making the copy after. We're talking about this very specific conduct of misleading the Secretary of State and the like. But then at sentencing, the sentencing language and the considerations end up broadening out from that considerably and getting into the very issues that you say is outside of that box that helps you defend the convictions on their merits. But my concern is that it did substantially inform the sentence that was imposed, and that creates some constitutional problems, and you don't get to ride both horses.
Well, I think it's a different forum, and that really is, I mean, the rules that we have for the jury are different because
absolutely.
And so I think that is the first part of my response. The other piece of it is, again, she made it relevant by spending, she had a slideshow. She spent pages and pages going on about this. How is the court supposed to just ignore that? I mean, of course it's going to be, the court is considering, it has all its considerations in front of it, and it referenced, it said she doesn't have any remorse. In fact, she's standing up here and doubling down on it. So I think the court, and I see that I'm out of time, so I'll finish there unless you wanted to.
No, I think this is important territory. But it's one thing to say, look, she said this and I don't agree, but then to impose additional, or to make it part of the calculation as to whether or not you're going to impose the length of the prison sentence, to me, just because she raised it means that the court can comment on it as to whether or not perhaps it's persuaded or the like. But my concern is that the court didn't say that she's engaging in all of these hoaxes and she's undermining public confidence and she's doing all of these things that I think are very detrimental to society, but I'm not considering those for purposes of sentence because she is here on these convictions and that is the exercise of her First Amendment rights. Instead, I'm going to impose the sentence based on this. So we can address it and reject it, but what my read of the transcript is, the judge considered that and it went into the calculation of the sentence, and that's a First Amendment problem. Can you disabuse me of that concern?
Well, I think the court used strong language and addressed that. I think the court, I mean, again, as I've said, it's the context, but I think if you look closely at the transcript, the court did lay all that out and then say, but at the end of the day, I think that might even be the quote, at the end of the day, this is about what you did. You violated these security protocols. You had a duty to enforce the security of the elections, and instead you violated it. So he ended up, that was the basis of the
But counsel, this was not about a security breach. This was about misleading public officials to conducting a trusted build in the presence of other people. She wasn't charged or convicted with a security breach. And so that's still beyond the charged conduct and the convicted conduct. I mean, did she try to make it relevant? Yes, but the court exercised its discretion, and you say correctly, to keep that out, but then it let it inform, that broader picture inform the sentence that it imposed. I think having it both ways it fundamentally undermines or calls into question the fairness of the sentence, potentially. Why doesn't it?
I understand the concern. I do, and maybe I misspoke. I urge the court to look at the transcript, because I do think the court made that distinction and talked about what she did here, deceiving. I mean, whether we call it violating the security protocols or saying she's a public servant, she's supposed to enforce this, and then here she is deceiving other public officials.
Actually, but that's my concern, is we can't just say, whether we want to call it this or that, it's still the same thing. That's not true. What was very, very important here is that what she did was brought people in, and what she was charged with was lying about who they were so something would occur in front of them. She was not convicted for bringing those people in. And so I think that the constrained nature of what these offenses are also should inform what the sentence is that the court imposes and what conduct it considers in deciding what the appropriate sentence is.
And I apologize, maybe I'm not being clear. I am trying to focus in. I think the court was focused on the deception of these public officials, and that is what she was charged with.
But what does it matter, given the passage of time, the departure from the office, and the fact that she is still espousing them? He focused, at least for what I see as a significant part of his comments, on her continued statements. Why isn't that a problem? She's not in a position to do what she did again. There's not a specific deterrence aspect of the Stewart case cited by the people on the attorney who said they would do it again. She can't do it again. I mean, unless the people re-elect her, which then question whether they want that. But this is a democratic society. So she's not in a position to do it again. Her continued belief in the facts that she asserts, or the situation she asserts, has no bearing on any sentence consideration. Not deterrence, certainly shouldn't be punishment. Why should we not be concerned that he focused so much on her continued peddling of the snake oil?
I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't be concerned, but I don't think there's an error. I think that she spent so much time talking about it. It was the backdrop of the case. There's a lot of publicity. Maybe the court felt like it had an obligation to say that it did not agree with what she was saying, and that he thought the conduct was improper. But if you look at
he can't sentence her more because he doesn't agree with what she's saying.
I agree with that. I'm saying, I think there's two things that happened. I think the court made some comments, and then I think the court, if you look at the transcript, talks about the basis of the sentence, which is her conduct, her criminal conduct.
And I don't blame the court for how it characterized it, given what occurred at sentencing up to that point. I mean, the sentencing argument on both sides hadn't been well tailored to the convictions or what she was tried for and convicted for. But at the end of the day, isn't the judge's responsibility to make sure to kind of separate that wheat from the chaff and only focus on appropriate considerations, or if it wants to address those, explicitly tell us that it's not considering those in the imposition of sentence.
Maybe that would have been a better practice, and maybe we can disagree with how the court whether the court it was appropriate for a court to make those kind of comments. But I think that's a different question than whether he sentenced her based on that. And again, I think the transcript, it's very easy to focus on the very strong language that the court used. But if you look, it really did turn the page essentially and say, this is what we're here for, and this is why I'm sentencing.
And we should consider the totality of the sentencing transcript in making our evaluation.
It was consecutive.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Anything else from my colleagues? All right, very good. If you would give 9 minutes of rebuttal to, I'm adding the additional 7 minutes that we allowed them to go over, so that it's a total of 9. And with that, Mr. Case, the floor is. Well, give me just 1 second, Mr. Case. Let's get can we get a total of about 9 minutes on the clock? Perfect. Yeah, there. Just start it.
It's kind of like football. Reset the clock. So I like the way the court zeroed in on sentencing, because you have a 70-year-old woman, nonviolent, first offense, probation eligible, never had a traffic ticket before all this, given 9 years in the penitentiary. So under DOC regulations, she ought to be in a minimum security facility with similar defendants, nonviolent.
How do you respond to the people's argument that despite the harsh language, when you continue to read the transcript of the sentencing hearing, the court actually sentenced her based on the counts on which she was convicted?
Well, I say that's baloney. I was there. I heard the way he imposed the sentence. He was vicious. And we're asking the court, if this case is remanded, please order a different judge.
Did you raise that in your brief anywhere?
Where?
The request, I mean, that's a different.
Yeah, that's the relief we asked for, based on the fact that he denied her a free trial and sentenced her to 9 years because of what she was saying.
So you're saying if we reverse and remand on the sentence, that it be resentenced in front of a different judicial officer?
Well, and retry.
But if it's just reversed on sentencing, it's resentencing in front of a different judicial officer is your request?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. So I didn't know this, but until this case, but Colorado doesn't have minimum security facilities for women, just men. They have 4 minimum securities for men, none for women. So who are Clerk Peters' cohabitants in La Vista? Murderers, child molesters, drug dealers. That's the majority of the population. And why is she there? Because of what she said.
Counsel, can you address the response that, to the extent the court commented on things that she had said, it was based on the statements that she injected into the sentencing proceedings? She injected how she, the reasons that she was serving. I mean, she talked in her. We're looking at. I read the whole sentencing transcript,
right.
and she put some things in there that were also outside of the scope of what was immediately before the court. Why didn't that open the door to the court addressing the issues that she raised and the affirmative representations that she made about what her motives were and her honesty and integrity?
Well, I think Judge Tao answered that question.
Interestingly enough, I wasn't listening closely enough because I'm listening for answers to come from the podium, not next to me. So
we've been colleagues for 15 years. It wouldn't be the first time.
Said it's up to the court to, give her a fair trial and a fair sentence, and to rule justly, not bring that in when it's outside it wasn't what she was convicted of.
Fair enough.
Are you saying that the court couldn't address her slideshow presentation, her PowerPoint presentation?
Sure, he could comment on it, but since she wasn't convicted of anything in it, he can't sentence her for it. The one thing that Clerk Peters did bring up at sentencing that he did consider and used as a sentencing aggravator was her prior conviction for contempt. That conviction was erased, was overturned, vacated after sentencing. So she's entitled to be resentenced for that reason alone.
And that's not an error on the court's part, because at the time that was a conviction that had validly entered. It was subsequently vacated, right?
Well, we submitted evidence at sentencing that the whole thing was a fabrication by the DA, but the judge overlooked that too.
Okay.
So I want to go back to your earlier questions on the immunity issue. So there's nothing wrong with using a false name. You're not required to give the name that's on your birth certificate or your driver's license, unless you're doing it for fraudulent purpose. So Here, there was no fraudulent purpose. The clerk introduces Conan Hayes as Jerry Wood. Now, what's the harm to the Secretary of State? None. After the Secretary of State leaves...
The harm is to Mr. Wood. It doesn't have to be harm to the... When there's a criminal impersonation, somebody gives a false name to avoid an active arrest warrant, the police aren't harmed. It's the person whose name was used, if they're a real person.
Well, Gerald Wood was not harmed. He volunteered to let Hayes use his key card. And the key card is issued so the clerk can control who's on her premises.
Well, I think that was disputed at trial, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So 8 times during this trial, the prosecutor referred to Hayes as a cyber mercenary. Clerk Peters wanted to present evidence and tried to that Hayes had worked as a confidential government informant, that his ID had been protected in the past, that he had used alternative identities, that he was given authorization to access voting equipment for purposes of writing reports for the government, and the court wouldn't let the jury hear it.
But I don't understand how that's a defense to anything that she was charged with respect to attempt to influence a public official or the criminal impersonation.
Because there has to be an intent to deceive, and the deception has to be towards
No, there
somebody.
doesn't. There has to be an intent to alter a decision.
Right, alter a decision. So
Right,
what's the
so her
decision?
intent, the decision is to conduct the trusted build
Yes.
in the presence of people that she knew the Secretary of State would not conduct the trusted build in front of.
Yes,
matters, just
but what's the harm?
It doesn't need to be harm. That's an official
You just said it was
decision
harm.
that she is attempting to influence.
In fact, if anything, the argument admits that she intended to deceive. She thinks she has a valid reason to do so. Again, I
Right.
mentioned it in questioning your opponent. You're conflating the issues of motive with intent. Elementally, for that crime, the only intent required to be proven is the intent to impact the decision of the public decision maker, or of the public official. She intended to impact it. She's saying, I needed to hide his identity. She's admitting, essentially, doing it.
Yes.
She just says she has a good reason. That's motive, not intent.
Well, okay. Appreciate the distinction, but there's no harm to the Secretary of State. When the trusted bill, when the wipe is done, they do an acceptance check. The Secretary of State checks it, they leave, then Dominion checks it, then...
Can you point to me in the statute where harm is an element of this offense?
No, it's not an element of the offense.
Which is why the court ruled it was irrelevant, right?
Well, but the point is the jury could consider harm in deciding what her intent was and what
Why?
her motives were. Why?
The jury didn't have to decide what the motives were. The motives are irrelevant.
Well,
They're not elements of the offense. They're not something for the jury to consider, are they?
yes, because she thought she had a duty to protect those records and to see what was happening to her county computers during the trusted bill. That was her job. And so it was important to her that Hayes had been authorized to use false names in the past and that he had the credentials to do his job. So we submit that's why that evidence should have been allowed. The court said during the Curtis advisement, I'm not going to let her say that. I'm not going to let her testify that she knew Hayes was an informant. That's why she didn't testify and get to present her defense. Now, on the issue of sufficiency of the evidence, there were 3 counts where there is a fatal flaw when and if this gets remanded. The first is the attempt to influence Romero. It's all based on Exhibit 18, this email. There's no evidence Peters knew about the email. It was sent by Sandy Brown to Romero. She wasn't copied on it.
Wasn't that a fact question for the jury?
Well, yeah, but there's no, it's not if there's no evidence to support it.
All right,
There's
counsel.
simply no evidence she knew about the email.
Very good. Your rebuttal time has expired.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Very good. Thank you, counsel, as well as members of the public. We appreciate your interest in this case and your patience this afternoon as you waited for it to be called. I think we may have started a little bit late, but I appreciate that, and I also appreciate having folks here that get to see our democracy in action and what we do in these courts. This is not this isn't law and order. We're not doing the most exciting work here, but it's very important work to our democracy, and I appreciate the concern and attention that you paid to it. Thank you to counsel on both that had an opportunity to argue and who were also on the briefs. Your briefs were very helpful, as was today's argument. The case will stand submitted, and a written opinion will issue in due course. And with that, we will be in recess if the bailiff will so announce.
The court will be in recess, subject to call.
All right, let's go ahead and take this down. You know, I got pretty heated, and I took some notes, and I saw some of the things that you guys were saying in the comments. So let's start here. First of all, John Case, I think, missed a couple of key arguments, and so I plan on having a conversation with John Case later. But here's my issue with what John is saying specifically. Number one, he missed on the fact that it's chicken and egg. And this is the reason why courts are able to skirt the issue related to election technology, because they have no understanding of the fundamentals of that election technology. They said that, you know, she had a duty to preserve. And they also stated that the Secretary of State had told everybody to make a copy and that you had to keep a copy of those records. That is absolutely false. That is not true. So let's put that aside. Now, the court made an assumption that the Secretary of State would have informed every county clerk and recorder to make a copy of election records before the trusted bill, but she never did. Matter of fact, here's another thing that John failed to mention, and I think it's important. Tina Peters did not just go find Conan Hayes. Tina Peters was not the one that instructed anyone to turn off the cameras. Tina Peters is not the one that said get a secondary badge. She didn't do any of that. If this was a case of the crimes that were committed, even though the crimes of preservation that she did were seen by the court as, okay, you have this right. Why were the other people not charged? Why was Sharona Bishop not charged? Why was Conan Hayes not charged? Why was Gerald Wood not charged? Why were they not charged? I would contend, and I think this is absolute, that they weren't charged because they wanted to make an example out of Tina Peters. And so on one side, you said that she has a duty to preserve. Now, let's say that she preserved, and John Case did not argue this correctly. He should have argued this differently than how he argued, in my opinion. Okay, so, you know, I'm not the one on the hot seat sitting in front of a panel of judges. I'm not a big fan of judges. I've just said that before. I think that, you know, I think this panel of judges did a better job of having the conversation and looking at what the arguments were. But you missed fundamental parts of the argument. She has a duty to preserve. She preserved one. She went to the IT department. She said, hey, I need you to make a copy of this for me. The IT department of the city and county, or the county of Mesa, declined. They said, we won't help you do that. Now, if the rule is you have to preserve this for 22 months, and the Secretary of State was coming in, and Tina Peters knowingly went to her IT department there first and said, look, I need you to make a copy of this for me. And then the trusted build came in, and the trusted build came in and did the trusted build. They also conflated a few other details that somebody was there when the trusted build that was being built that was not authorized. Tina Peters had full authorization over her office. She had full authority over her office. She could have had Mickey Mouse in her office. She had the authority to, she used the badging system as a way to make sure that she fundamentally knew who came and went. So she had the authority to bring in anybody she wanted to perform her duties. She could do it at any time. There's no law, no rule, nothing that would stop that from happening. Now, let's fast forward a little bit further, and she made a copy of the trust to build. She made one copy here, she made a trust to build copy. Now, what the judges tried to argue is that there was no duty that she had, or there's no obligation nor authority for her to investigate. So simply put, the AG's office attorney argued that, well, Elbert County made a copy of it and then turned it over to the Secretary of State, but didn't go as far as to say that it was a forced turnover of that specific image that was made also of the 2020 election. And when that image went to the Secretary of State's office, the Secretary of State's office then destroyed that image. So if you have no duty to investigate, then how would you know? If you made an image here and you made an image here and every other county destroyed all the images, including Arapahoe County and all the other images that we saw happen. If that's the case, then how would you be able to tell the difference if you didn't investigate it, that there was improprieties that were happening at the highest level? How would you be able to uncover a cartel or the crime syndicate that has been unified in the state of Colorado? And when we're talking about election records and finding that the three reports specifically drew a line, the three Mesa County reports drew a line to massive election fraud that's been going on for God knows how long. So how do you contend that you can have a duty to preserve but not a duty to investigate whether or not the preservation was necessary and a crime was committed? And if you went to your own IT department and said make a copy and they said they wouldn't, and you bring someone in from the outside, why is it that the details of the person that came in from the outside still to this day was not even discussed in this trial with the three judges? There's a problem. Now, let's look at the other parts of this. Let's look at the other parts of this case that I think are important. You cannot have an investigation. You can't just have an image and then say, okay, I trust you, I made an image. Because if you're not investigating it, who is? And the idea that the only people that can investigate it are the people that are probably committing the crime, then what you're saying is that I'm capitulating to a system that was designed to enslave the people. And that the county clerk's entire job is to create a kabuki theater that frankly has no teeth. And if the judge is allowed to stand up there and say, you have authority as the Secretary of State, but you don't have authority, and both were elected by the people, then how does the state bring charges on the actions that were performed in order to preserve the records inside of the election? And if what they're saying is accurate, then explain this to me. Why did the investigator call up Matt Crane, investigator in this case in the AG's office that was put on loan to Dan Rubenstein, and say, I need you to tell me how I can debunk these three reports, Mesa reports, that were done on the image in Mesa County? And how is it we've been able to walk past one of the most simple, fundamental parts of the Dominion system that prove that there is election fraud, systemic election fraud, and the systems were designed to defraud the very people they say they represent? And that is the MySQL management software in this small town in rural Colorado. I would contend that the entire system across Colorado is a system designed to defraud the people. Now, we now have whistleblowers, we have people from Venezuela, we have other people that used to work for Dominion voting systems that also worked for Sequoia that have come forward. We've got all sorts of evidence from experts, from Roger Fuller to Ed Solomon. We could talk about the other experts related to ASOG. We could talk about Jeff Lindbergh, who worked for Sandia Labs. We have massive experts. We could talk about my friend who is no longer with us. When we ran through this in December of 2020, we built this model and then we took it to Washington and we presented it to the Secretary of State's office, Pompeo's office, to council. We built a model before the election ever happened on January 5th. We were able to predict the entire outcome and the functional aspects of what happened on election night on January 5th, 2021. I never would have known that had we not had the capabilities of looking at what the Dominion system was capable of doing and what actions would have to be taken in order for both of those Democrat senators to win Georgia by a combined total of 0.7%. I wouldn't have known that. There would have been no way that I would have been able to see any of that if what I'm saying is not accurate. So Limbaugh says they let the bank robbers handle their own investigation, winky, winky. Yes, they did. Here's why, I became calmer as I started to listen to the argument of the assistant AG from Weiser's office. One, she stepped on herself. She tried to plead both sides of it. One, there's a felony charge that was given the same wording as a misdemeanor. That should be grounds for that case, for that particular charge, even found guilty of it, to be resentenced on. The sentencing relates back to the First Amendment. That too should be something that they consider based on the words of the judge in the actual sentencing. And when the AGA, or the assistant AAG in this case, talked about the fact, well, there was no harm done, except for the fact, and nobody brought it up, which I find absolutely bewildering, and that is the difference between concurrently and consecutively. If it was done concurrently, then the charges, say he has 4 charges, this is typically how it happens. You get 3 years here, 3 years here, 3 years here, that's 9 years. You run it concurrently, that means you serve 3 years. You're serving each one of those at the same time. There's consecutively when you really want to do damage to the person that you're talking to. Typically this happens in murder convictions, robbery with bodily harm, when people have and have done something with intent. Now, the other thing that the judges brought up is the intent argument. And the intent was, did she have intent? And they're like, well, it doesn't matter if she had intent. By the way, I'm going back and forth with Max McGuire, and look, I don't think I've ever met a bigger legal mind than Max McGuire, but we're just talking about this particular case. We're not talking about anything else related to the other things that I talked about related to the elections. We're just having a conversation about what the judge is doing and what how the judges are asking questions. And so he's a brilliant mind. I think he should go to law school, frankly. All right, so if we look at in totality what we're up against, and we just look at we're looking at a basket of different arguments that were made. John Case missed a couple of arguments and he came back, and there's some teeth here. There's some things that we've talked about related to the conduct of the judge, the conduct of the DA. They didn't bring up the DA's conduct related to not bringing in any outside experts, that they went and relied on basically the bank robber themselves. So Dominion came in, committed a crime. They went back to Dominion and said, hey, by the way, give me the information on why we should believe you. That's not how you create an investigation. That's how a cartel protects itself. And remember I said before, at the very top you have the boss. We haven't figured out who all the bosses are. And then underneath that, you have the captains. The captains are the elected officials and the people that are put in positions of trust. These are people that are like the Jenna Griswolds, the Jared Polis. Jonathan Mosley said, Joe Altman, the Secretary of State admitted that their request to know who would attend the trusted build was a COVID control policy, not an election rule. Secretary of State Jenna Griswold had... I didn't even think about that. That's brilliant, Jonathan. Thank you. And I'm going to be meeting with some of the attorneys tonight for Tina. So I'll bring up a lot of the things that we just talked about just now. But we have to start looking at this holistically from Griswold had no authority over attendance at the meeting. The Colorado Department of Public Health sets COVID policy. Okay, so this is where you have conflation. So Jonathan, thank you about that, where they conflate the rules of the Secretary of State with law. And this is where ink dries. So they decide that rules are law and that they can prosecute you based on not actually following their rules. Now, in any other state, that had a sensible ability for you to have good judges. Now, do I think there's a state in the country that has good judges? Man, I hope so. Colorado's not one of them. I mean, this appeal panel seemed like probably the most logical among them. And next week, by the way, we're going to get into the amended complaint of Eric Coomer that the judge in that case was allowed to falsify and say, okay, we're going to let you have a complaint. We're going to let you amend that complaint. We're going to let you get discovery. We're looking at all the different ways inside of the Eric Coomer case that they have basically tried to bury the facts and create a slanderous environment. Now, I'm going to tell you guys one thing. I have never stopped talking, right? When you, the American people, get raped and get abused by a company that says that they are private while doing a public good, and the guy that runs everything, who's been around for 16 years and was already found to be bad in 2006 when they were forced to sell Sequoia voting system because of bad behavior, not because it was nefarious behavior. It was criminal activity that was happening between Smartmatic and Sequoia voting systems that forced CIFIS, which is an organization that overlooks any national security interest. That was in 2006, 2007, that forced them to sell in 2010. They handed the company over to managers of Sequoia voting systems, including Eric Coomer, and Smartmatic was allowed to retain those records. If you look back at the behavior of this person, and he's doing a public good and says that, hey, trust us, sit back, you're not allowed to look into the machines, right? But you're allowed to be raped, and they're allowed to say that you have you could go over here and you can vote and you can make it look like it counts, but we're allowed to decide anything that happens, you are not allowed to criticize it. That's where we're at right there. And that they could do whatever they want and they can sue you. In essence, every single case that has gone to court related to election fraud, whether it's Tina Peters, Mayor Giuliani, the Trump campaign, OAN, Newsmax, Fox News, the judges stacked it against the ability to get access to the information. Even so, even to a degree that, frankly, it would be impossible for you to ignore. The the Dominion v. Byrne in Washington, D.C., the judge in that case fired Byrne's attorneys, sealed the record on criminal acts that were committed, that stuff that was turned over to Sheriff Darleaf. Then the DOJ hid that behavior and would not investigate it under the Biden administration and has continued to hold the same position in not investigating the fraud against the people by these election systems. Now, the reason why they've done that, I don't know. It probably has a lot more to do with the fact that how far do you unravel the blanket? How far do you go back? If you go back 20 years and you're saying that the people that were doing this were nefarious, then all the laws for the last 20 years have to be undone because the people did not represent the people. Now, I would contend that has to happen, that we have to back laws up 20 years completely back them up, get rid of agencies, get rid of organizations that have committed crimes against the American people. I would argue that has to happen. But that's the reason why they haven't done it. This has very little to do whether or not you think the election systems are fraudulent or not fraudulent. We have proven it over and over and over again. You would have to be complicit, a retard, or just flat evil to believe that our election systems have a semblance of free and fair across the country, because they don't. I don't care if you're talking about ES&S, Smartmatic, Dominion, it doesn't matter. Liberty Vote, it's all trash. And for the last 2 years since President Trump has been elected, they've been stealing every election. Down ballot, all the way across the board. Douglas County, Colorado, one of the reddest states out there, a 70-30. The school board in Douglas County put in radical leftists on the entire school board. And now parents in Douglas County are leaving in record numbers because they're not going to have their kids subjected to pride flags on the wall where you don't actually do the Pledge of Allegiance. The American flags are being stripped out of there, and they're putting in Satan clubs and all sorts of other stuff, books that are meant to promote pedophilia. That's all happening in Douglas County right now. All of that. Because the elections were stolen at such a local level. Whew. Nothing will be cleaned up in the country until the judicial system is. That's why I said that we have to have military tribunals and that we're going to have to gut the judiciary. And that, I mean, frankly, this is how you get rid of the cartel. And whether we're talking about the synagogue of Satan, which is what we have here in Colorado, or how it closely resembles the Republicans and Democrats across the country that are standing in the way of progress. We do not have a democracy in this country. Unless you want to talk about mob rule by organized crime, then maybe we can talk about it. It's a democratic process for which cartel is going to run what state, how they divvy up all the tax dollars that you go out and earn. 56 cents on every dollar that you make goes to the government. And I'll just ask you the simple question that I ask everyone else. Can you get rid of a bad judge? Can you get rid of them? And the answer is no, you can't. You can vote them out after 3 years after they ruin thousands of lives. Do you have a way, a mechanism that the American people can stop a cartel of judiciary from doing bad things to the people, not just in Colorado, but across the board? And the answer is no. If they pick a public interest, if they decide that they want to punish you, the process is the punishment, and then whatever they decide to put in front of you, they can just lock it down. They know the Supreme Court's not going to do anything. The DOJ, if you look at the Christopher Gregory case, they're not going to step in the middle. It'll take 5 years. They'll try to just outrun justice in a case. And the people, the have-nots, they rarely, if ever, get any justice. The system was designed to punish and to enslave the very people it says it represents. It doesn't represent the people. Oh. Now we get down to how do we solve this, right? How do we solve this? I don't know. I mean, I think that the only way that we solve this, frankly, is to sign the Insurrection Act. Invoke the Insurrection Act. And invoking the Insurrection Act, I think you got to arrest 50,000 people. I think you got to be prepared for and look at this from a national level of insurrection and sedition. And you can, look, I've said this before. If I'm wrong, put it in the comments that I'm wrong. Put it in the comments. If you were to go out and ask anyone, if you were to go out on any social media platform, left or right, you were to ask someone who is for getting rid of ICE, and you were to ask the question, a simple question, do you trust the judiciary? What do you think the answer would be? 99.5% of the time. You trust judges. What do you think? Jonathan says, both Christine O'Donnell, graduate of Ava Marie Law School, and I think Joe Olman's commentary is the best. She must be a lawyer, the lawyer in the flannel shirt. I'm not a lawyer, but Jonathan, are you a lawyer? Answer that question if you're a lawyer. I do study a lot of stuff, but I'm not a lawyer. What was I talking about? Well, yeah, do you trust? I think you could ask any of them, and none of them would say you could trust judges. Matter of fact, if you looked at the lawyers that are out there, I have some real. So I don't know what's wrong with me, but I have a lot of good friends that are lawyers. I have good friends that are. I have a couple of judge friends. I have a couple young judge friends, and so I say some things that are all encompassing. I'm like, judges are trash, and then my friend will call me and say, Joe, let's go have lunch, and he'll say, listen, and I'm like, listen, your job is to weed out all the bad judges, and one of my friends is probably one of the best attorneys out there, and he's such a good man. Man, he is. His name's Kevin, probably one of the best men I've ever met. He is a great man, and he's a judge. And so it's kind of like I'm looking at this and going, the judiciary is rotted out, but I have this great man, this man that is a judge he's just awesome. He was a DA, and he was a prosecutor, and I don't want to tell his story. I hope to God that one day I get to tell his story. He gets to tell his story. I have begged him to run for office. He's like, I'm not a politician. And I was like, but you're an amazing man. He was a prosecutor in a case, and he looked at every single case as a DA, and he would look at it on the merits of intent, and he would look on it like what happened. And he would spend an enormous amount of time, because the conscience that he had could not find himself putting someone away for a long time for a case where he felt like that justice wouldn't be served, and that's not what the facts of the case suggest. And so he took a case, and I hope I'm not misstating this, Kevin. I know you'll probably hear this, but he took a case, and by the way, this is a guy that when everything blew up on me in 2020, and I'm in fear for my life, lots of stuff is happening, he lives close to me. And he goes, Joe, if you need anything, you just let me know. I haven't even met him yet. I had not spent a lot of time with him, right? I think I'd met him once before. And he picked up the phone and he called me and he goes, I will be right there. I will come down and I will protect your family. You just tell me you need me. He didn't even know me. So he goes in, and the DA at the time, who was the elected official, the top dog, says to him, I want you to get him 10 years. That's all you can give him on the plea deal is 10 years. And he's like, I can't do that. We should offer him probation. I mean, this is the facts of the case. I even feel bad even bringing the case, but I have to bring the case. But he should get probation. And the DA says, you will give him 10 years. You will go in there, and all you could give him is 10 years. And you know what Kevin did? I don't even know if it was 10 years. It could have been more than that. It could have been a little less than that. But it was a drastic difference. And I know it was, the alternative was probation. So he went in there, he defied the DA, he gave him a deal that included probation, and then he went back to the office and he resigned. That is a man of integrity. That's what I expect from the judiciary. I expect that good people like Kevin. I could talk about another woman who is a judge who I know, who's a friend of mine. I could talk about my attorney in the Coomer case, Ingrid, who is amazing, who happens to be an attorney in another corruption case in Colorado, and happens to have other cases that she's watched the DOJ erode to zero. We need more Kevins. And instead, we're left with people like, I thought he was my friend. I thought George Brockler was a good man. In 2018, I had him on, did a huge thing on him. I pushed out information on him to get him to be the Attorney General of Colorado. And then he writes an entire commentary on why Tina Peters should be in jail. And I find myself disgusted by him. Completely disgusted. A two-headed snake that's willing to sell out individual people in our community. Make examples of good people, hurt good people, and let bad people go. We need more Kevins. We need lots more Kevins. Every single time I talk to an attorney friend of mine, whether I'm golfing or anywhere else, they say the same thing. Joe, I don't even recognize the judiciary anymore. It's so lawless and rotted that you have no idea what the outcome is. You have a case that's absolutely perfectly laid out, and that judge will rule against you because somewhere along the line they did some social score deal, or they don't even know. They have no idea how judges come up with some of the crazy things that they do, and that they stand and impede the ability for justice to be served. And Colorado is among the worst. I don't care about Polis or Jenna Griswold. I don't care if you're gay, straight, green, yellow, purple, Muslim, Christian, I don't care. I don't care if you're an atheist. I think if you fundamentally do things to harm other people because you have an ideology, I think you're just an evil piece of trash. And I really don't have any time for you. This whole thing with these, I think the judges are going to rule in favor of Tina Peters. I do. I think it's going to take them a little bit, but I think that at a minimum, they will remand it back for resentencing. At a maximum, they will throw out a couple of the cases, a couple of the charges. They will have to examine the consecutive versus concurrent. They'll have to. And they'll have to examine the words of the judge. But that still doesn't solve the problem we have in our judiciary. It doesn't solve the problem with rotted out election systems. Like, I'm running for governor and I hate the idea of running for governor. And as I sat and talked to people today, as I sat and talked to my hairdresser today, I just asked the question, a simple question. Why can't the ridiculous be set aside? Why can't we get to a society that has rails on it that allows for us to operate ethically and morally? And if you choose, I talked to Coy Griffin today, Cowboys for Trump, and he's totally disenfranchised. And he's like, Joe, I can't believe this. I can't believe that we're at this place. We're a year in and we haven't got rid of machines and mail-in ballots. We haven't done enough. And this gets down to a failure of the DOJ to protect itself. The organism itself is a cancer that has infected every other part of our government, and that organism has no accountability. Judges have no accountability. And as we see this kind of play out, and the American people say, we elected President Trump to get a job done. But then the media operates as another organism that does damage to the people inside the communities that elected President Trump to do what he needs to do. But then the judiciary comes in and says, nope, we're going to stop you over 130 times. We're going to stop you from actually having tariffs and eliminating people that are here illegally that committed crimes. And again, we don't set aside the ridiculous. We allow judges to create ideological albatrosses in our community that we have to live with. And they basically try to run the clock. And so why in the world can't we get rid of machines? Why can't we get rid of mail-in ballots? Why can't we have an ID that you have to have an ID? Well, the argument of the radical left is that that's racist. But there's nothing that supports it. They just create some sort of white paper and say, well, see, there's this person that lives in a village in the middle of eastern Colorado and that person can't vote because it doesn't have an ID. And instead of solving the one problem by saying, here's your ID, we paid for it for you. Instead of doing that, they put in universal mail-in ballots and you don't have an ID and somebody can actually vouch for you. Absolutely absurd. We cater to the absurd and we let the ridiculous operate as if it's even sensible. The same thing can be said for teachers and professors inside of the schools. You can solve a lot of problems by just getting back to the KISS principle. Anybody know what that is? Jonathan, if you want to call in, I would love to have you give me your thoughts on what you just heard in the case. So Jonathan said I was a lawyer for 22 years. Can somebody give me an email that Jonathan can email real quick, put it in the comments? I'd love to have Jonathan, I'd love to have him come in and give me his thoughts. Okay. And if you don't want to do it, just say, yeah, I don't want to do it. But the KISS principle is keep it simple, stupid. Okay? If we got back to KISS principle, we'd be in a much better place. The people on both sides of the aisle want educational opportunity for their kids. We heard, Anthony from yesterday, Chavez. By the way, he's not a Republican. Okay? He's a Democrat. He's a great guy. He's a father, single dad. He doesn't have the same, we don't align with everything. We don't believe the same thing. One of my best friends and business partner, 14 years, gay, married, Jewish, father of 2. We don't align on everything, But the fundamentals of keeping it simple would allow for us to eliminate all of the chaos, right? You don't put a pride flag up in schools. It's just not allowed. You get an American flag and that's it. Everything that is considered political, we don't tolerate it. And the bullying, which is what's happening against straight kids, that goes out the window too. And if a teacher talks about gendering people and doing all that stuff, that teacher is fired. You wake up and you walk into the classroom, you sit down, and at 7 o'clock in the morning when you start class, or at 8:10 or whatever it is, you stand up and you go, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And you do that every single day of school. And then you go teach them math, you teach them science, you teach them English. I'm talking about in the comments, if you can, yeah, there you go, Patrick got it. That's how you do it. See how easy that was? And that's just one problem. Let's look at the other problems. We have tollways. So over $30 million every single month goes to an Australian private equity fund, which, by the way, they hide inside the books. If you go to look at the financials in the state of Colorado, you can't find it. But they have these private-public partnerships that allow for law enforcement, state patrol, to go and give people tickets so they can make their money too, while handing over a vast majority of the money that comes in from the people in Colorado to a foreign country. That's the reality. So you eliminate it. You basically come in and say, yeah, we're getting rid of that contract, or we're going to sue you. All right, well, sue us. You're charging $8 to go 15 miles. It's the most expensive roads in the entire country. But they got away with it because somebody along the line got paid a bunch of money. And if you think what I'm saying is not true, then why did the politicians run out, Romer and all these other guys run out and buy land on the eastern, out east, and then sell it back for a 20x multiple when they decided to build 470 and the airport way out east? Go check the records. I'm not lying. This is absolutely true. How does Hickenlooper own all these different restaurants and buildings? And I mean, he's built an entire empire. And why is it the politicians end up making money on the backs of Americans in Colorado? We'll just talk about Colorado for right now. And we don't have any, and our education standard is degrading to such a place that we spend $140 or $200 million renovating a building downtown for the haves, while we don't even have air conditioning and we don't even have basic fundamentals inside of the high schools for kids in our own environment. The kids are the future, right? No, the kids are not the future. Government employees are the future, because they get marble buildings and marble floors, and judges get black robes and beautiful accompaniments, and the people walk in and they get to bow down to the master. It doesn't. You can eliminate a lot of these things by just focusing in on the people. Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't care. I mean, Tina Peters is in jail right now, and the first thing she does is she writes out entire letters of things that people inside the prisons have done to these women, including a woman being raped in the back of a transport van. And then they wouldn't even settle for the woman. They said, we'll give you 20 grand. She's like, no, I want you to get rid of my sentence so I can get out of here. She was raped, by the way. And they said, no, we'll just put her on the docket for 2 years from now and kick the can down the road. That's a case that Tina Peters uncovered. Not counting the mold and the food and the cockroaches in the kitchen and what they've done to make sure that they make these women live in miserable environments. And all the things that Tina Peters has brought to the forefront, these people are treated like animals. You just heard John Case talk about the fact there is no minimum security facility in the state of Colorado for women. Why would that not be? But you didn't know that until Tina Peters went to prison. And those people are the have-nots. They have no access to anything. Our fundamental, let me just say this, fundamentally speaking, our entire state is in a state of absolute disrepair. And you can fix all of it by creating points of accountability, getting rid of all of the judges, having free, fair, and safe elections. And by the way, you can do that, and it's still not going to solve the problem, but it will help move things back so that the Overton window is over something that is at least has the appearance to be somewhat more just than what it is now. That's what we have to do. And that's why I'm running for governor. I'm not running for governor because I want to be a governor.
I actually don't want to be a governor. I don't want to be a politician. I don't want to be involved in any of it. I want to go back to building tech and doing really cool things. But I got this asshole Eric Coomer who's lying out his asshole with his lawyers and saying they wrote this entire thing about me, that have defamed me everywhere, that have put up this gaslit deal that we have safe and secure elections when we know we don't. We have evidence in all 50 states. All 50 states. And if what I'm saying is not true, why did Dominion just walk away after a $787 million payday and sell to Liberty Vote? And then say, you don't have, as the public, you don't have a right to look at the documents as to what we sold it for. And I will bet you $1. I'll bet you a lot of money that they did not sell Dominion for any, they probably just gave it away. Here, it's your turn. It's your turn to tell them it's a free, fair, and safe election, while ignoring the history and ignoring all the people who have testified that they have stolen elections, not just in the United States, but all around the country, all around the world. And you can see at the degradation of each country, and you can see the countries that don't have problems, those are the countries that have fair elections. Poland, do they have fair elections? 100%. Do they have problems with immigration? Do they have problems with crime? Do they have their education system inside of Poland is probably one of the best in the world. Does Russia have problems? Oh yeah, he wasn't really elected. Go talk to people that are from Russia, and they'll disagree with you. So we want to talk badly about the countries that don't have election problems, and every other country out there that has election problems, they're the poster child for how people should be treated. You believe that? Loden says everyone is oohing and ahhing over Victor Marx, and he won't even give any information about his platform. I didn't even know Joe was running. Oh, I'm running. Sorry. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I'm sorry, Jonathan. If you could just send an email, I would love to have you on. I would love to have you on. I would love to have anybody on that's a lawyer that can just give me some ideas on whether or not I'm seeing things through beer goggles. Now, the last thing I will say is this. Rumble, the platform, is absolute 100% doing everything they can to censor me, every single thing they can. This is not uncommon to any other platform that's out there. They're all doing the same thing. I want to thank Max for sending me over the algorithms to measure out whether or not there is censorship happening on those platforms. That was a brilliant find, Max. I appreciate you very much for it. Yeah, we're gonna do some more stuff related to the governor race. I have a couple of things that I'm going to be doing to speak at events. Tonight, I'm going to be spending a little bit of time with Peter Tickton, who is the attorney for President Trump. He's also the attorney for Tina Peters. Obviously, he was sitting right next to John Case. So we're going to kind of walk through things and try to come up with some conclusions. But overall, you know, I just ask you to do a few things. I ask you to keep praying. Like, pray, stand up, speak your mind, speak. You know, I want to get really angry too. I started this out just kind of with this frustration, this boiling frustration. And I just keep coming back to the other part, which is we have to trust in the Lord. We have to trust God. We have to trust him, but we also have to act. So we have to pray, we have to stand, we have to speak, we have to act. And if we do those things and return back to prayer, we can never become the very thing that we're fighting against. So Colorado quit scrubbing federal election records, then railroading county clerks, period. Yeah, I would agree with that. All right. If you want to follow us, you can follow us, obviously me, at Joe Oltman. You can follow Tina Peters, at Real Tina Peters. Drop a message of encouragement to President Trump. You can do that at Real Donald Trump on X. You can go to and set up an account on Truth Social and give President Trump some encouragement. And also say, listen, the time is now. We've got to get people in positions of trust that are willing to arrest people and do things. And if that means that you have to be an unpopular president and do things that haven't been done before, well, things have been done to you that haven't been done before either. You've been charged with crimes that didn't actually happen. You've had people take money from you that never belonged to them. You've had massive things done against you. Imagine what's been done to the American people by the same system they were able to shop through and create all these persecutions against you. So we've got to get to a DOJ that actually is sensible, that isn't political. It should be based on what's right or wrong. And we've got to get rid of bad judges. And if you're a good judge out there and you're listening to this, and I am putting too much of a big bow around it, first of all, I will say to you, Kevin,
you're amazing. I need you to run for office. For the woman that is a friend of mine, they're both lawyers, who is also a judge, I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by a couple of judges that I know that are good people. Now, does that mean that there are more good judges? Yes. But do I think that it's rotted to the core in the judiciary and it's not moving fast enough, and you have people like Polis that can put judges in different positions and ruin cases? Yes, I believe that's the case as well. I believe people at the very top of the judiciary are really bad. So we'll see if we can get through it. Yeah, let's get him on. Let's get Jonathan on if we can. Patrick, we'll do it next time, and we'll follow up. Follow us on Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, Google, all that stuff. And I want to thank you for the last 5 years, right? We pray, and we ask God to kind of just change it all for us, right? We take it to him. And we say, look, Father, you've got to help us. Like, we're in it to win it. Like, we want this. We want to plow the fields. We want to do whatever's necessary. Whatever you want us to do, we'll do it. But please give us these things. Give us free and fair elections so that we can get back to restoration. Because ultimately, I think that's what it's going to take. In order to restore things and to keep that kiss, we're going to have people like me that frankly we're unwilling participants. 5 years, unwilling participant. Being governor, unwilling participant. We put unwilling participants in there, we get in, do the job, we get back out, right? That's what's gonna have to happen in order to solve some of these holistic problems we have across the board. So let's pray. Father God, thank you. Thank you for Tina's attorneys. Thank you for Tina. Thank you for her unselfish desire to serve and what she's doing for these women inside the prison. She's doing these things for the women inside the prison while she is fighting for her very life. She's 70 years old. She's a Gold Star mom. She's never been arrested for anything. And they have demonized, they have bullied, they have defamed her. So Father, I just ask you we break it wide open and we get to the part where we hold people accountable for their bad behavior. And whatever that looks like, I don't know what it looks like, but that's what we want. And we know that your will should be done, but we don't feel like we're asking for anything, Father, that's outside the scope of what you would want. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe we haven't learned enough. Maybe we haven't suffered enough. So if that's the case, Father, we'll continue to have faith and we'll continue to walk this path. But I ask you to lift that burden of hopelessness and to replace it with a burden of conviction, that we can be convicted to operate with courage and to serve each other. And Father, the R and the D, they frustrate me, the Republican and Democrat, because they don't represent the goodness. They don't represent that which the people want on any aisle. It has become a muddled mess of people that self-indulge and seek power and money and position. They seek to be known, Father. And I would just ask that we break that down and we just get good people that are convicted to do good by the people in this country. Father, I ask that we allow us to be an example for how goodness can actually just be pervasive through a community and through a country. And that we can solve the problems by eliminating the bad people that have done really bad things to the American people, that have betrayed them. We also ask you, Father, to bless and to protect President Trump, protect the people that are doing a lot of this really hard work, from Hegseth to Bobby Kennedy there's just people that are just doing great things. And we just ask you, Father, that you will unite them, set aside petty differences, and stop the politics that are interfering with us getting to a place where we have secure elections that lead to your voice, Father, being heard. Not our voice, but just the goodness of your voice coming through in how we administer and how we function as a society and as a community. So I ask for these things, Father, humbly, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. I will see you guys later. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being with us for so long. Remember to follow us. Remember to share. And remember to have faith, right? And don't be a black pillar. Don't be a black pillar. Be the one that stands up. I'll see you at one of the events that we're having, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.
forgotten and the free, exposing rigged machines, Kuma's lies, Dominion's deceit, pays $1,000 each day, shielding truth from corrupt halls, but he won't back down, standing tall through it all. Hart and Tina Peters break the chains that bind her tight, hand count votes and one day bring the fraud to light. No more mailing scams, no machines to steal the night, restore the people's voice, make Colorado right. Governor Roman, lead us bold and true, badass for the have-nots, fighting through and through. Abolish property tax, cut the tolls away, shrink the bloated state, let the people have their say. Roman, it's our rally call, truth and freedom rise and watch the tyrants fall. Untamed Colorado, strong and proud, we'll be one man for the people, set our great state free. Help the single moms, bring back trade school strong, opportunity for youth, where the brave belong. Audit every NGO, ban the wolves that roam, reclaim our stolen land, bring the power home. Eric Kuma's fraud, Dominion's rigged design, expose the stolen votes, cross the dangerous line. No more victimhood, no chains on you and me. He's running for governor for real liberty. Smash the fraud machine, pardon heroes jailed, for the have-nots rising, truth will never fail. One warrior defies the corrupt elite, Colorado reborn, strong on our feet. Governor Roman, lead us bold and true, badass for the have-nots, fighting through and through. Abolish property tax, cut the tolls away, shrink the bloated state, let the people have the say. Governor Roman, it's our rally call, truth and freedom rise and watch the tyrants fall. Untamed Colorado, strong and proud, we'll be one man for the people, set our great state free. Governor Roman, lead us bold and true. Governor Roman, freedom forever, Colorado rise. Governor Roman, Governor Roman, Governor Roman, Governor Roman, Governor Roman, Governor rise up untamed, in the heart of the fight where the wild ones roam. Joe Oleman's calling, bringing truth back home. From conservative daily to this untamed fire, we shatter the silence, lifting spirits higher. No chains can hold us, no lies can prevail. Authentic and fearless on this rugged trail, patriots gather under stars and stripes. Untamed nation, igniting the nights. Untamed nation, let the truth roll out in this land of the free. Standing proud from sea to shining sea, we won't back down. Catch the fire, wear the crown. Untamed nation, it's our battle song, motivating hearts where the brave belong. Yeah, untamed and wild, forever strong. Play it again all night long. Break the mold, chase the real, no more games, time to heal. Joe's voice leads the untamed crew. Truth matters through and through. Untamed nation, let the truth roll out in this land of the free. Standing proud from sea to shining sea, we won't back down. Catch the fire, wear the crown. where the brave